Chapter 385. Isn't that Yu Qianqiu? So it's that madman. No wonder. Hearing that, Yu Qianqiu, who was already in a bad mood, immediately took out a big black machete from his storage bag. Wherever the blade pointed, everyone retreated. Who's tired of living? Why don't you say a few words for me? I'll make sure you're satisfied. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly with the machete in hand. No one said anything. Sure enough, the bigger the machete, the more intimidating it was. There was an old man in the store who recognized Yu Qianqiu. He quickly whispered a few words into the manager's ear. However, it seemed like the manager had already heard everyone's words, especially that rather unique machete, which was unique in the cultivation world. It was hard not to know who the person in front of him was. Yu Qianqiu turned the machete around and pointed it at the manager. The manager's expression changed. He immediately smiled and said, "So it's Mr. Yu. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. If you have any orders, just tell me. As long as I can do it, I'll do my best." The manager had no choice but to admit defeat. This guy was famous for being a madman in the cultivation world. Was there anyone he didn't dare to hit? No. Was there anyone he didn't dare to kill? No. Even the dignified sect master Ong Kwangsung was killed by him. But he was still alive and kicking here. So what if he broke a counter? What was the point of a small manager's face? The blade of that big black machete was just a little bit away from pointing at the manager's head. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You're a snob. If you don't want me to tear down the 100 Flowers residence, hurry up and prepare a private room." Yu Qianqiu knew how to play this game. Some people weren't afraid of good people, but they were afraid of hooligans. Since his reputation wasn't good, he might as well be unreasonable. The onlookers at the side were convinced. This guy was an out-and-out madman. He came all the way to the 100 Flowers Valley to tear down the 100 Flowers Palace. There would probably be a good show to watch. It was Ziyi's first time seeing such a bandit side of Yu Qianqiu. She was really a little surprised. No need to prepare, no need to prepare. There's an empty private room upstairs. Follow me. The manager carefully moved away from the machete and led the way upstairs. Before Yu Qianqiu went up the stairs, he coldly swept his eyes over the crowd. They all acted as if they didn't care about him and dispersed. But after they left, they gathered at a place not far from the 100 Flowers house and waited, ready to watch the show. Sure enough, as soon as Yu Qianqiu went upstairs, an attendant immediately ran out of the store. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was having flower money blaming her, everyone so he directly that storage bag and they continued to wait. "I'll buy it. How much?" Zhang Gui led the two of them to the private room on the top floor. She happily put away the price a little high before he turned and said to be a happy day. "Mr. Yu, the manager were elegant and elegant. I'd fool anyone. He liked to hear this the shopkeeper thought to himself that the money spent to smash the 100 Flowers just as he was about to bring Ziyi back to 100 Flowers house to rest. What an idiotic nonsense. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and wouldn't bother with these small window and pushed it open. He directly paid and took this fellow used to eat and drink with the fragrance of the 100 Flowers stall had flower conversations. Ziyi also came and stopped halfway. "How have you been?" The two of them stood at the window. Everyone here seemed to know you. He really had a lot of acquaintance with burning clouds that he had hung out with him for the mountains were hazy and could be considered old friends. Tired birds flew across the sky and returned his storage bag in his hand. Downstairs was the matter how good I am. I can't compare to you. Although it heard that you came to 100 Flowers activity and caused commoners in the cultivation world seemed like women didn't come here just to ask about this. They didn't want to give up especially when there was a man who was willing to pay with money. All his was new to after shopping at the stayed in the South Sea. Purple stones were cultivation alliance received a challenge. Enough shops were much more expensive than the things. All the sects in the cultivation alliance they're making money like us. Of course, Elder Quan asked us to inform the other individual cultivators. Ziyi didn't join her cultivation then she nodded and said, "And as long as she liked Valley to she would make cultivation alliance tomorrow. It's a waste of time to run around all day. I just heard that we don't know when someone was the leader of the moon herself also couldn't remember how many were now also a member of the cultivation alliance. We found this one track because we are familiar with each other. He smiled and said,
everything in
they
the
want to
stall
live a
and
peaceful
shop.
life.
He
even
So
filled
they're
up
making
Yen's
a small
storage
amount,
bag
challenging
money.
the
It was
cultivation
already making a lot of
night.
money.
There was no more shopping.
and asked
You
again
won't
to
have just
confirm.
remembered
Small
that
amounts
she's
of
going to
money.
meet
Bought a
at the
lot of things.
cultivation alliance
She looked at daughter Yin so embarrassed by
Yin
Palace.
we
Were
worried
worried
about Yin.
It seems like he spent a lot of money.
Although they were
stopped
stopped
by the people
Isn't it
from
a
the
little too late
cultivation
to ask
alliance
her?
now?
And
Xiong
Xiong
Yuan's gaze had already answered her question to persuade the cultivation alliance.
Han
To do with
said
that
embarrassing that he would come
Qianqiu
every
really
day.
didn't mean it.
Turned his head and said,
I know you didn't mean it.
The mother and daughter were really
handed
tired.
over the
After that,
before the
first wave
subsided,
who was
another
likely
wave
to be
by
a
child.
A
A disciple of Palace quickly came and reported.
Ze received
Palace
Master
storage bags.
387.
Someone from Divine
the
Palace
next day
reported that
the sun had already risen high.
She didn't
Bai
expect to buy
But
so many.
Qianqiu
Even
was
broke
still
the counter
soundly.
How should we deal with him?
He had been
Carrying
flying
the
nonstop
nonstop
for the
bags.
past
By
few
Hua
days.
Fairy was a little
He was
surprised
indeed
and
a little
tired.
weakly
The one who held the
How much
blade
did
was
you spend in
ceremony
meditate
to recover.
It's okay.
The disciple
But he
bowed and
considered these
said,
things
primitive
as a
way
gift
should
from
be
him.
You
can earn more
money
after
lying
you
on the
spend
bed
it
with his legs.
as long as
Sarah
you
was
have
also a kind of
He
shameless.
smiled.
So it can't be anyone else but him. Asterisk in his
The
dream.
mother and daughter
He was
exchanged
still in his
glances.
previous life. Just
And
a
he
few
was
days
discussing
ago,
physiological
they received a
problems
message
with
from
a few
Majugu,
blonde and blue-eyed
saying
ladies.
that if they ever run into any
Unfortunately,
trouble in the
he
future,
was awakened by a
they can
series
look
of
for
knocks on the
Qianqiu.
door.
He got up and
wouldn't
looked
shirk
around,
their
and
responsibility,
he couldn't help but
and
sigh
would have a way to
slightly.
solve it for
As
them.
expected,
The
he was
mother and
dreaming.
daughter were still
The era of
confused
four
by
wheels
this.
was gone forever.
Although Qianqiu was
Asterisk
quite
dong
famous
dong
in the
dong.
cultivation
Asterisk
world,
the knocks on the
what
door
problem could he
continued,
possibly
and
help them
Qianqiu
solve?
immediately
But
shouted,
Majugu wasn't
"Who is
one
it?
to speak
Who
carelessly.
is it?
Now,
Why are you
before
knocking
they
on the
even
door
looked
so
for him
early
to
in
solve
the
their
morning?
problem?
Don't you
He's
know that
already
you're sleeping?
causing trouble.
He got
I'll
off
go
the
take a
bed
look.
unhappily
Yin
and got
Zixia
up to
said.
retract
As
all
she
the
was
black
about to
fiend
leave,
traps
her mother
that
called
he had
out,
set up around him into his
Zixia,
body.
it's best
He
if
had
you
no
don't
choice
go
but
out.
to do this.
If you run into your
Often,
father,
people who
you'll be
schemed
in trouble
against
again.
others were also afraid
Hua
of being
Fairy waved
schemed
her
against
hand
by
at
the
others.
disciple and said,
Back then,
he had
leave.
schemed against
Don't
Lu
look into
Jingguang
Yu
here.
Qianqiu's matter.
Now that he was
All
living
of his
here,
expenses at
he was
Bai Hua
also
Palace
worried
will
that
be
he would
free.
be schemed against
The
by
disciple
others.
was a bit surprised.
After all, he had
but still
offended
followed
too many
her words
people
and left.
He had originally
Yin
wanted to
Zixia's eyes
retreat
flickered
to
as she
Utopia
looked
to rest
outside the palace,
but he was a little
not knowing
worried
what
about
she was
leaving
thinking.
Ze.
After
Who was
enjoying
as
the
innocent
scenery
as a
for a
piece
while,
of white paper
Yu
here.
Qianqiu still
Although
didn't see
Ze's
any
cultivation
food
was
being
much
served.
higher than his,
Just as he was feeling
was still a
strange,
little worried. He suddenly
Speaking
noticed
of
that
which,
many
he
people
didn't know who
downstairs
was
were looking
protecting
at
who.
them,
He
as if
walked
they
to
were
the door
watching
and
a
pulled
show.
it open.
Yu Qianqiu's
Just as he was about
expression
to
suddenly
curse,
changed.
he saw Zi
This
standing
shopkeeper was
outside the
clearly
door with her
stalling for
hands
time.
behind her back.
He might have gone
She
to
had
Bai
an
Hua
obedient
Palace
expression,
to look for
and
reinforcements.
there was a hint of a
He
fawning
slammed his palm
expression
on the
her
windowsill
face
and said in
This
a
was
low voice,
unprecedented.
"Do you really
Needless
think
to
I
say,
don't dare to burn
she was
down
the
Bai
one
Hua
who knocked on the
Palace?"
door.
Zi Qianqiu swallowed
was
back his
admiring the
curses
scenery
and asked
outside, was
suspiciously,
surprised.
"Why are you
Not knowing
knocking
why
on my
he
door
suddenly
so
got
early in the
angry.
morning?
At this time,
It's not early."
the shopkeeper's
It's
voice
already
came
noon.
from outside.
Didn't someone ask
Mister,
you to
don't
go to
worry,
the
the food is
cultivation
here.
alliance last night?
As soon as the
Zi
shopkeeper
asked.
came in,
Yu
a
Qianqiu
few
rolled his
waiters
eyes,
came in with trays
turned
of
around,
food and wine,
and went back
quickly
to his room.
arranging them on the
As
table.
he walked, he said,
Yu Qianqiu
in
stared
their
at him
eyes
and
were
asked,
just two lousy loose
"Why are you
cultivators.
so late?
Why
Do you
are
want
we
to do
involved in
something?"
that? They have
Mister,
their
you
meeting,
misunderstand.
and we just have to
The
take care of
shopkeeper bowed
ourselves.
with a smile.
He walked
We
to
just
the side
received
of the
an
bed,
order from the
tilted his
palace
body,
lord,
and fell back
The
down.
palace lord said
In
to
fact,
treat
he
you
really
well,
wanted to get
and
involved.
all the expenses
In
of
his
Bai Hua
words,
Palace
the
will
more
be
people
waived.
there were,
You
the more
see,
opportunities
since
there
the
were to
palace
get
lord
rich.
has already given
But when
the
he
order,
thought that Yin
we
Bugui
naturally
had
don't
brought
dare
a
to
group of
delay.
people,
So
and
the
had a grudge
preparation
against
time
him,
is a bit long.
he decided that
For
it was
this
better
shopkeeper
to
to
avoid
be
the
sent
brunt
to
of
be
the
the
conflict.
shopkeeper of Bai Hua
He did
Palace.
not want to be the one
He
who
wasn't
challenged the
completely
cultivation
useless.
alliance.
He was quite good with
that
words.
would not be pleasant.
When Yu Qianqiu heard about the
Zi
palace
entered
lord
the
of
room
Bai
and
Hua
said,
Palace,
"But there are
he
people
immediately
from the four
remembered
great
Majugu's
clans waiting
request.
for you downstairs.
It would be a bit too
They
much
say
if
they
he
want to wait
continued
for you
to
to
make
go
trouble.
with them."
Seeing that the
four
food and
great
wine were
families.
already served,
Ha!
he waved
Yu
his
Qianqiu
hand.
crawled up and asked,
"All of you can leave.
"How did you know?"
Thank the
He went
palace
down
lord
alone.
for her kindness.
Zi stuttered
I
and
will
said, thank her in person
Didn't
if
you
there's
say
a
it's a
chance.
waste not to eat
Okay,
something
enjoy.
that doesn't cost
The
money?
shopkeeper nodded
I think
and bowed.
the food in this
Then let
restaurant
the waiters
is quite
away.
delicious. So I
Yu
went
Qianqiu
down to
walked
order
around
some
the
food
table
by
full of
myself.
food and wine.
It just so
and
happens
found that the
the
dishes
people
were
from the four
exquisite as
major families
expected.
are
He
waiting
waved
for
his
you
hand at
downstairs.
Ze,
who
I'll
was
help
looking
them
at
ask
him.
you after I finish
Eat.
eating.
He took the
Wouldn't
lead
it be
to
a
sit
waste
down
not to eat it?
and opened his mouth to
Qianqiu
eat.
was startled.
It would be a waste
seemed
not
that
to
he
eat
really
something
did
that
say
didn't
that to
cost
her.
money. She had a
Shopkeeper
strong
just
learning
said that
ability.
it's free.
Does
Does
it
it
cost
sleep
money?
anymore?
Ze
He
sat
the
down
water
and
spell.
asked, and
With
a
food
stream
in
of
his
clear
mouth,
water
Yu
came out of
Qianqiu nodded
Qianqiu's palm.
repeatedly.
One
It's
stream
free.
went into his
Eat
mouth
as
to
much as you
clean,
want,
and
otherwise
the rest
it will
will
be
be
used
used
to
to
wash his face.
Hearing that it
After
really didn't
washing,
cost money,
the turbid
Ze's
water
eyes
gathered
lit
into
up,
a ball,
and she
Yu
immediately
Qianqiu
didn't
opened the
stand
window,
on ceremony.
waved his hand.
This was what she learned
and the
from
water
Yu
turned
Qianqiu.
into an arrow
Don't
and
be
shot
polite
out.
when you shouldn't
As for
be.
where it would
Otherwise,
land,
you
he
would
was
be
too
letting
lazy to
yourself
think
down.
about it. After
the
eating
end,
and drinking
Ziyi
to
was
his heart's
completely
content,
dumbfounded.
There was no one downstairs,
And when he saw
they were
Ziyi
probably
stop, he
all
was
at the
stunned.
Cultivation
Only
Alliance.
now did he remember
the four
something.
great clans sent
It
8
seemed
people.
that every time he
the 4
ate,
elders were
as
by
long
Shan,
as he was still
Tan
eating,
Huazong,
this
Jing
girl would
Xingping
also
and
not
Wu
stop.
Anfeng. The
But
4
as
of
soon
them
as he
were at the
stopped,
middle stage
she
of
would immediately
tribulation
stop
passing.
eating.
Except
It seemed
for the
like this
elder from
girl's
the Wu
appetite
clan who
wasn't
looked small.
familiar.
She
Yu
could even
Qianqiu
keep
did
up
not
with his
know
trip.
any of them.
Yu
The
Qianqiu
remaining
was
4
happy.
people were old
He originally
acquaintances.
wanted to be
They were
extravagant
the first
for this
successors
girl.
of the 4
But he
great
didn't
clans.
expect that the
By
food and wine
Zizong
would be
and the
free.
other 3.
Then he
When
would
the 8
make
of
up
them
for
saw
it
Yu
in other
Qianqiu,
ways.
they all
He
bowed
stood
and
up and
said,
smiled.
"Mr.
Let's
Yu,
go, I'll bring
no
you
need
out
to
for
be
a
so
walk."
polite."
No
Ziyi
need to be
nodded
so
repeatedly
polite.
and
And
stood
stood
up
up
as
as well.
smiled and waved his
She
hand.
loved to walk around.
He turned around
but
and
it was
said
a pity that
to Ziyi,
during this period
"Go,
of
get
time,
me the food you had
she
this
had been
morning."
flying nonstop in the
Ziyi
sky.
didn't say anything.
When the 2 of them
and
went
straight
downstairs,
to the counter to
they
order.
realized that
The
the broken
shopkeeper
counter
smiled
had been
and nodded,
replaced with a new
but his
one.
smile seemed
It
a
was
little
indeed
unnatural.
fast.
Brother
Qianqiu
Bai, you
walked
guys are
over
here
and knocked
too?
on the counter
As soon
and
as
said,
Yu Qianqiu said
"Shopkeeper,
this,
reserve
Zizong
2
and the
good
other
rooms
3
for me."
quickly said,
"I might have to
"We
stay
don't
here
dare."
for a period of
Now
time.
that the seniority
All
between
right.
them was different
The
from
shopkeeper
before,
hurriedly agreed.
the 4 of them
This
didn't
guy
dare
couldn't
to
be
call him
provoked.
brother anymore.
Even the higher-ups
Moreover,
didn't pursue the
there
matter.
were 4 elders
What else
beside
could he
him.
say?
It wasn't
After
the right
the 2
time
of them
to talk
walked
about
out of
this
the
in front of
100-flower
everyone.
pavilion,
Yu
the
Qianqiu looked
shopkeepers
at
of
the
the
4
4
of
of
them
them
and
clans,
asked,
who
"What
had
do you
been
want from
waiting
me?"
outside for a
The
long
4
time,
elders looked at each other
immediately
and
came
nodded.
over to greet
By
them.
Shan,
Yu
the elder
Qianqiu
of the
had
Bai
a pleasant
clan,
expression
stood up and
as he
replied.
politely persuaded
After
the
the
4
4
of them
great
to
clans
return
received the
and
Cultivation
continued strolling
Alliance's
around
notice,
with Ziyi.
they sent
The
us here
people who were
overnight.
originally
We
prepared to
learned
watch
that
the
Sir
show
is in the 100
immediately
Flowers
dispersed
Valley
in disappointment
and has joined the
They didn't
Cultivation
expect
Alliance.
that the 100 Flowers
Before we
Palace
left,
actually
the
didn't
elders of
cause
the
trouble
4
for
great
Yu
clans
Qianqiu.
told us that if
And
Sir
looking
needs
at
any
how the
help,
shopkeepers
we
of the
should
4
do our
major
best to
families
cooperate.
treated Yu Qianqiu.
It
Yu
seemed like the
Qianqiu
rumor
smiled
that the 4 major
non-committally.
families,
The waiter
and
of
Yu
the 100
Qianqiu
Flowers
were on the
house
same
had
side
already
was
served
indeed
the
true.
food. The
He asked
prosperity of the
casually,
shop market
"Do you
was
want to
quite
eat
tempting
together?"
to Ziyi.
Seeing that they
Seeing
shook
every
their
novel
heads,
thing,
he didn't
she
hold
couldn't
back
help
and
but
buried
stop
his
to
head
take a
in the
look and
food.
touch it.
He didn't
She
say
was a little
anything,
reluctant
and
to
no
let
one
go.
knew what he was thinking. The 8 of them were a little speechless. They heard about him smashing the 100 Flowers house as soon as they arrived, and they still ate and lived here. They didn't hear about the people of the 100 Flowers Palace doing anything to him. After eating, Yu Qianqiu patted his stomach, looking very comfortable. Bai Zizong had stayed with him before, and knew that he liked to take advantage of others. He immediately went to pay for him, but the shopkeeper didn't accept it. He said that Yu Qianqiu's expenses in the 100 Flowers house were all free, which surprised the 8 of them. Smashing the place and living for free. Was there such a good thing in the world? I heard that the Cultivation Alliance is discussing something. Aren't you 4 great clans going? Yu Qianqiu asked leisurely. Sir, didn't you join the Cultivation Alliance? Didn't you receive the notice? Bai Shan asked curiously. It wasn't hard to guess what he meant. We came here to make our stand and wait for you to go together. Of course, Yu Qianqiu also heard it. He paused and said, Someone did inform me, but I was busy with something important just now, so I was delayed. Then, sir, are you done with what you have on hand? If you're free, let's go together, Bai Shan said politely. Yu Qianqiu wanted to say that he wasn't done, but he happened to meet Ziyi's strange gaze. He couldn't help but feel guilty. Thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't good. If he kept hiding here, he had to go out and get some information. How could he get rich hiding in his room? Moreover, a whole morning had passed. The Cultivation Alliance's discussion was probably almost done. It was the right time to show his face and ask for information. All right, then let's go together. Yu Qianqiu laughed. There were exactly 10 people in the group. As soon as they left the 100 Flowers house, they started pushing each other. The 4 great clans insisted that Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi walk in front. However, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to show off at this time, so he insisted on hiding at the back. In the end, the 4 great clans couldn't persuade him, so they let him and Ziyi follow behind. It didn't take long for the group to reach the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. At this time, there were already a lot of people around. They were all people who didn't have the right to enter. Seeing that the 4 great clans had arrived, someone immediately jeered. The 4 great clans are so arrogant. Coming at this time, they really don't care about the sex. With one person taking the lead, there were others who had nothing to do and followed suit. The 4 great clans suddenly became the center of attention. Although the 4 great clans weren't happy, they wouldn't argue with these people in public. Moreover, they really came too late, so they could only look at them coldly. The jeering people took advantage of the number of people, and saw that the four great clans didn't react, so they were very cocky. Damn it! A bunch of hooligans, purposely making me show off. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. The four great clans became the center of attention. He couldn't keep a low profile even if he wanted to hide at the back. Many people realized that the person behind the four great clans was Yu Qianqiu, so they all remained silent. However, there were those who were dumb, stupid and loud. When Yu Qianqiu showed himself, there was a person next to him who was grinning and almost spitting on Yu Qianqiu's face. Bang! A fist smashed heavily on that person's face, and blood and broken teeth flew out. Crack! A foot kicked from the side of that person's calf. The sound of the leg bone breaking was so crisp, and the whole leg was directly broken. Ah! That person fell to the ground and let out a scream. Tch. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but make a move and scolded. After some people next to that person saw who it was, they all subconsciously took a step back. Just enough time for that person to hug his leg and lie on the ground, howling and rolling. At this time, the surrounding people realized that the person who had just punched and kicked was Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly quieted down. The people from the four great clans looked back and were shocked. They didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu would actually make a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. However, the effect of this punch and kick was quite good, and the annoying noise was finally gone. The crowd in front immediately made way for them. Yu Qianqiu acted like nothing had happened, and followed behind the four great clans. After proving his identity at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance, they walked in together. On the flat ground of the Cultivation Alliance, hundreds of people sat cross-legged in a few circles. In the middle were the representatives of the top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sections. At this time they were all looking outside. Everyone first heard many people talking about the four great clans, and then heard the screams outside. They didn't know what was going on. All the sects were suspicious. Could it be that the people from the four great clans made a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance? At this time, the people from the four great clans walked in, and all the sects became more and more suspicious. What the hell are you screaming for? Two of you go and see what exactly is going on. Qiu Wuyuan didn't know what was going on, and he shouted with a bad expression. 2 of the 10,000 demons immediately dashed out. There were many praying mats outside the venue, and the 10 of them each took one and sat at the outermost area. Although Yu Qianqiu wanted to be as low-key as possible, Ziyi's purple clothes were too eye-catching. Once everyone saw Ziyi, their eyes immediately searched for him. Qiu Wuyuan looked outside, and then looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of suspicion. At this time, 2 disciples of the 10,000 demons came back and reported to him. Elder Qiu, a disciple of the Six-Path Demon sect, was beaten outside. But no one saw clearly who did it. The person who was beaten didn't see clearly either. The 2 of them were very depressed. The person who was beaten said that he was ambushed, and he didn't see clearly, but the others all stuttered and said that they didn't see clearly. Yu Qianqiu was even more stunned. There was such a good thing. A figure in the crowd jumped into the air and flipped out of the courtyard. After a while, that person came back in a flash and stood at the periphery, staring angrily at the people from the 4 great clans. He shouted, "Who dares to hurt my disciple? Quickly come out and admit your guilt." Chapter 387. The Hexapath Devil sect was ranked 4th in the demonic Tao, just below the Corpse sect. The one who roared at the 4 major families was the chief representative of the Hexapath Devil sect, Yuan Jiukui. He was an outstanding figure in the demonic Tao, famous for his violent temper and battle prowess. Although the overall strength of the Hexapath Devil sect wasn't as strong as the other top-ranked sects, Yuan Jiukui's personal strength wasn't any weaker than the other sections. "Who injured my disciple? Come out and accept your punishment." Yuan Jiukui roared once more. When he heard that his disciple was beaten up, he immediately ran out to investigate. Although the disciple didn't see who did it, he said that it was someone from the 4 major families. So he was sure that it was someone from the 4 major families who did it. How could they accept that their disciple was beaten up when all the sects were gathered here? Furthermore, The Hexapath Devil sect had no reason to be afraid of the four major families, so they naturally had to get back their face. The expressions of the people from the four great clans changed. This was clearly against the four great clans. As a direct descendant of Bai Changchun, Bai Shan naturally could not let Yu Qianqiu come out to accept his punishment. Just as he was about to stand up and fight back, he was stopped by Yu Qianqiu, who was behind him. Yu Qianqiu slowly stood up. He was still happy when he heard that no one saw who did it, so he wanted to maintain his silence. However, the other party had already pointed at the noses of the four major families. If it was any other sect, he would definitely continue to pretend that he didn't know anything. However, the four major families were related to him, and they would be of great help to him in the future. He didn't want to disappoint them. I was the one who did it. Yu Qianqiu admitted it. Everyone had expected this. They were all puzzled. The four major families had always been neutral, and they never had any conflicts with any sections. So why would they attack someone at this moment? It was Yu Qianqiu, that madman. That made sense. It's you. Yuan Jiuque was slightly startled. Then anger rose in his heart. He pointed his finger and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, don't you dare run amok in the cultivation world just because you're a bandit. Others give you some face, but you really think you're something? I, Yuan Jiuque, have never put a clown like you in my eyes. How dare a scoundrel like you mess around in front of my Six Paths demon sect? Elder brother Yuan, don't be angry, don't be angry. Qiu Wuyuan flashed over, pulled Yuan Jiuque and comforted him. Qiu Wuyuan, get out of my way. Yuan Jiuque swung his arm, turned around, pointed at Qiu Wuyuan's nose and scolded. I've always heard that you and this scoundrel are brothers. It's because of people like you that this scoundrel can run amok in the cultivation world. Don't call me elder brother in the future, or it will dirty my ears. Scram. Yuan Jiuque's words could be said to have hit the hearts of the people present. Although Yu Qianqiu was happy in the cultivation world, the sects that had been in the cultivation world for many years didn't really look up to Yu Qianqiu. If it wasn't for the ambiguous attitude of Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons towards Yu Qianqiu, someone would have already made a move on Yu Qianqiu. Not to mention that Yu Qianqiu had the support of the four major families. Yuan Jiuque's words were like a wake-up call to Yu Qianqiu. When he looked at the people in charge of the other sects, almost all of them looked down on him. Clearly, they all agreed with Yuan Jiuque's words. Yu Qianqiu immediately understood his position in the cultivation world. When he suddenly attacked someone at the entrance earlier, he subconsciously thought that he was afraid of anyone, because he was a scoundrel. He thought he was impressive, but in the eyes of the people with a certain level of status in the large sects, they did not look up to him at all. He could only scare those little disciples, who didn't have much of a cultivation base. How dare you? Just when Yuan Jiuque told Qiu Wuyuan to piss off, four bellows rang out. The four generals of the Mo family in black furs arrived with a flash, and surrounded Yuan Jiuque. Yuan Jiuque glanced around, and snorted coldly. 9 people immediately shot out from the crowd, and surrounded the 4 generals of the Mo family. They were clearly from the Hexapath demon sect. When I was dominating the world, the 4 of you were still slaves to Yin Wuchen. Yet you dare to yell at me now. Are you trying to rebel? Yuan Jiuque sneered. Then he waved his hand at the 9 people from the Hexapath demon sect, and called out, Leave! I'd like to see just what the 4 generals of the 10,000 demons are capable of. The domineering nature of a demonic cultivator was completely revealed in just a few words. Everyone was slightly speechless. It seemed like Yuan Jiuque wanted to deal with the 4 generals of the Mo family alone. The people from the Hexapath demon sect did not say anything else and backed down. After being called slaves, the 4 generals of the Mo family remained cold. They were not angered at all, but they began to radiate with pressing killing intent. Qiu Wuyuan was not a good-tempered person either, but his expression immediately returned to normal. He immediately yelled out, Stop messing around, all of you back off. Hearing that, the 4 generals of the Mo family immediately flashed behind him. They did not even hesitate at all. Brother Yuan, calm down. Let's talk things out. There's nothing that can't be resolved. Qiu Wuyuan was already giving face by saying something like that after being scolded. Otherwise, there was no reason for the 10,000 demons to be afraid of Yuan Jiuque, with their status in the demonic sections. That's right. Now that we're facing a great enemy, let's just bear with it for now. When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace originally wanted to watch the show between the 10,000 demons, but seeing that Qiu Wuyuan had given in, he knew that he couldn't watch it anymore. So he stood up and said something nice. After all, the righteous sects wanted to watch the show between the demonic sects more than him. The demonic sects could watch it, but the righteous sects could not. When Zi saw that Yu Qianqiu was in a daze after being scolded, her pretty face immediately turned cold. Senior Bai's disciple was not someone that could be scolded. She stood up and slowly walked towards Yuan Jiuque. The whole place instantly became incomparably quiet. Yuan Jiuque vigilantly looked back, and his pupil shrank. He immediately turned around and got into a fighting stance. He could look down on Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't dare to look down on Zi. This mysterious woman had fought against 7 experts in the final phase of tribulation passing. He knew that he was no match for her, but he couldn't lose the reputation of the hexapath demon sect. Qiu Wuyuan and Wen Zhongping looked at each other. This woman was not an ordinary person. Her background was mysterious, and they didn't know what her temper was like. The two of them didn't know what to do. Yuan Jiuque stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. A scoundrel is a scoundrel. He actually needs a woman to stand up for him. Yuan Jiuque, watch your mouth. What's wrong with a woman? A woman's voice sounded. In the field, 10 disciples in white from the Moon Clan stood up. The leading woman flashed over. It was Hua Yingyue, the elder of the Moon Clan. Hua Yingyue had already received a message from Jade Flower Fairy, asking her to protect Yu Qianqiu and Zi to the best of her ability. Yuan Jiuque's words just now finally gave her an excuse. The righteous people were all stunned. How come things were getting more and more complicated? Originally, they only wanted to see the diabolism become a joke, but now even the righteous people were involved. In a second, everyone understood. Yu Qianqiu and Zi had joined the Cultivation Alliance with the Moon Clan as their guarantor. The Moon Clan was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. The Fuxian Island and the Moon Clan had always been on good terms. Quan Deming also couldn't sit still. He flashed between the two groups and comforted. Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't be impulsive. The matter of Yin Bugui's challenge hasn't been decided yet. If we start fighting among ourselves, we'll become a laughing stock. Being blocked by a group of women, Yuan Jiuque himself was also stunned. Zi, come back. Yu Qianqiu's voice attracted everyone's attention. He walked forward and bowed deeply to Yuan Jiuque. Senior Yuan, please calm down. I was too impulsive just now. Please forgive me. He had thought it through. He had to lower his head when it was necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to integrate into this circle. If he didn't integrate into this circle, it would be hard for him to find a chance to make a fortune. He had to bear with it even if he felt uncomfortable. When his strength matured, he would be able to deal with anyone he wanted. When the various sects heard his words, they immediately felt that it was strange. This madman had always been unforgiving when he had the upper hand. Currently, with the appearance of Zi and the others, it was clear that he had already gained the upper hand. Yet, he still ran out to apologize with such a sincere attitude. It was truly surprising. Qiu Wuyuan stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. He wondered if he had seen wrongly. Although Yuan Jiuque's attitude was commendable, he had crippled a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect. Naturally, Yuan Jiuque wouldn't let this matter rest just because of an apology. Yuan Jiuque glared at Lin Yun and said, "Are you trying to let this matter go with just a sentence? May I know what this junior should do to appease senior?" Yu Qianqiu asked respectfully. Yuan Jiuque's gaze slowly shifted to Lin Yun's leg. He said in a solemn voice, "I won't say anything else. You broke the left leg of my disciple. If you can break your own leg, this old man will be able to answer to the sect when I return. This old man can also guarantee that the Six Paths Devil sect will treat this matter as if it never happened." The people of the 4 major clans also stood behind Yu Qianqiu when they heard this. They glared at Yuan Jiuque. The legs of a little disciple with low cultivation actually wanted to trade for the legs of their old ancestors' direct disciple. If they allowed this to happen, they wouldn't be able to return to the four major clans anymore. Ze looked at Yu Qianqiu with an expressionless face. As long as he gave the signal, she would immediately make a move. The other sects also felt that Yuan Jiuquei's condition was a bit too harsh. They suspected that he didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu's expression sank in an instant. He rubbed his nose as he looked at the crowd and sneered. It's not difficult for me to break one of my legs, but I have something to ask all of you. Although the four great clans and I arrived a bit late, it's fine if everyone provoked and insulted us at the entrance. After all, we were the ones who were rude first. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yuan Jiuquei. He shouted, "But what gives a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect the right to spit on my face in public? If I spit on your face, will you attack me? I'm afraid you'll even have the heart to kill me, right? There's such a thing. Then he's really asking for a beating." Everyone immediately whispered in each other's ears. Everyone had indeed heard the commotion outside, provoking and insulting the four clans. In such a chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that some naughty disciples would spit on the four clans. Yuan Jiuquei was startled when he heard that. How did the Six Paths Devil sect become the ones who stirred up trouble first? But after thinking about it, he was afraid that it was really possible. He paused and said with some uncertainty, "That's not possible." I've never been afraid of anyone." Yu Qianqiu looked around and sneered. "I know that everyone has a lot of misunderstandings about me, causing my reputation in the cultivation world to be bad. But I'm not a deranged person. How could I randomly grab someone and beat them? If Senior Yuan doesn't believe me, why don't you summon the disciple who was beaten? I can confront him directly. Who is right and who is wrong will naturally be clear." Chapter 388. Yuan Jiuquei's expression became gloomy. He wasn't completely clueless about that disciple, and he knew that the disciple wasn't very virtuous. But now, as Yu Qianqiu had said, he wanted to interrogate the disciple and find out that his side was in the wrong first. If that happened, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Most importantly, he thought that he was in the right and offended several groups of people. He even threw away the face of the Devil Path's leader, the 10,000 demons. If the truth came out, and it was disadvantageous to his side, he would be embarrassed. While he was hesitating, many people could see his apprehension. Qiu Wuyuan winked at Wen Zhongping and pulled Yuan Jiuquei with a smile. "Old brother Yuan, for my sake, this matter ends here. Don't pursue it anymore. I'll send someone to treat that disciple's injury, and I'll definitely return him a healthy leg." "That's right. Old brother Yuan, personal grudges are a small matter, but take the big picture into consideration." When Zhongping also persuaded, Yuan Jiuquei naturally understood that these two demonic cultivators were taking the opportunity to give him a way out. If he didn't appreciate it, then he wouldn't know how to appreciate a favor. But he didn't know if Yu Qianqiu would fight to the bitter end. This guy was famous for being merciless. Yuan Jiuquei looked at Yu Qianqiu. Qiu Wuyuan understood his meaning, so he walked over to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, patted his shoulder and said, "Old brother Yu, give this old brother some face and forget it. How about we end this matter here? Since Senior Qiu has spoken, we can swallow this small grievance." Yu Qianqiu also looked at Yuan Jiuquei and said, "I wonder if Senior Yuan still wants to pursue this matter." Humph. Yuan Jiuquei snorted heavily, then flashed back to his original position and sat down cross-legged. His attitude was obvious, indicating that he wouldn't pursue this matter any further. "What are you snorting about? Let's see if you still dare to snort when this father destroys your Six Paths demon sect one day." Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched. "It's better if this father doesn't pursue this matter. Then I won't waste my breath." He also turned around and returned to his seat. It's all right. Everyone, return to your positions." Qiu Wuyuan waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. The group of people returned to their positions, and this matter was over for the time being. Zi was still feeling quite indignant. She looked at Yu Qianqiu beside her and wondered what had happened to him. Yesterday, he had smashed someone's counter because of a single sentence, and today, He was scolded in the nose and endured it. Yu Qianqiu had already put this matter aside for the time being. He had thought that the discussion between the various sects had already ended, but who would have thought that it was still going on? He had no idea what had happened for it to take such a long time. He sat at the back and listened for a while before he understood. It turns out that this time, Yanbu Gui brought 2 Tribulation Realm cultivators with him, as well as 50 Tribulation Realm cultivators. A total of 53 people came to Baihua Palace, intending to reunite with Baihua Fairy as husband and wife. In the end, they were obstructed by the various sects led by the supporting Immortal Island. At that time, both sides almost came to blows. It was unknown what Yanbu Gui was thinking, but when he had the upper hand, he forcefully endured it. Actually, everyone understood that Yanbu Gui wasn't ready to officially turn against the Chinese cultivation world yet. He was probably still waiting for the foreign cultivation world's reinforcements to arrive, and the foreign cultivation world was probably also coordinating this matter. And the Chinese cultivation world wasn't ready either. The main reason was that there were too many sects, so it was hard for them to reach a consensus. The main problem was that once a fight broke out, who would contribute how much money, how much manpower, and who would be the commander? The righteous sects didn't feel at ease handing over manpower and money to the demonic sects, and vice versa. In fact, no one felt at ease handing over their own things to others. A large-scale war wasn't just a fight between 2 people. Once a winner was decided, they would have to be prepared for a long period of time. The longer it lasted, the more spirit stones and manpower would be consumed, and that would be a huge number. Although all the sects had stored a lot of spirit stones for emergencies, no one would take out their money for no reason. Who didn't hope that they would contribute less money and manpower, while others would contribute more? After the war, the strength of the sects might be reshuffled. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength. The foreign cultivation world on Yanbu Gui's side, as well as the Chinese cultivation world, were probably facing the same awkward situation, so they didn't start fighting for the time being. In short, whoever was ready first would make the first move. That was for sure. If they couldn't officially turn against each other, they could at least do something like east wind west wind, dampening the other party's morale. And so last night, Yanbu Gui suddenly sent someone to deliver a challenge Jade archive to the Cultivation Alliance. The content was very simple. Both sides would send their people to fight 20 rounds. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, the winner would be determined by the number of wins and losses. The loser would have to pay 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to the winner. Of course, the challenge couldn't be without rules. It was impossible for one side to send an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to fight, while the other side sent a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to kill the other side. That wouldn't be a challenge. It would be no different from seeking death. Yanbu Gui's letter of challenge stated that either side could send their people to challenge the other side first. One person could go on stage repeatedly, but the person sent by the challenged side couldn't have a higher cultivation level than the challenger. Of course, if the challenged side was willing to send someone with a lower cultivation level to die, the opposing side naturally wouldn't have any objections. That night, the Chinese cultivation world replied, "Accept the challenge." This was something that couldn't be avoided. Whoever dared to say the word avoid would probably be drowned in spittle. But 1 billion high-grade spirit stones couldn't possibly be given to a single sect. When it came to apportioning the money and manpower, it would be a little difficult. Anyone could make the argument, but the key was which sect would contribute the money and manpower? Thus, after discussing for half a day, they still couldn't come up with a solution. In short, everyone had thousands of reasons, all of which were for them to contribute less. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, his eyes almost emitted a green light, and he and Purple Dress looked at each other in unison. Yanbu Gui came from the 10,000 demons, and now he has become the scourge of the Chinese cultivation world. For this challenge, the 10,000 demons can't absolve themselves from the blame. I'm not saying that the 10,000 demons will pay all of the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, but the 10,000 demons still have to pay the most. Before Deluo Sec's Zhu Xianxian could finish, Qiu Wuyuan jumped up and scolded. Bullsh asterisk T. Yan Bugui has long established his own sect. He is him. And the 10,000 demons is 10,000 demons. If the Deluo sect doesn't want to pay, then just say it. Don't always use this as an excuse. This is the whole Chinese cultivation world's business, not the 10,000 demons business. Qiu Wuyuan, what you said is wrong. Why didn't someone like Yan Bugui come from other sects, but from the 10,000 demons? If it wasn't for the 10,000 demons' lack of discipline, this wouldn't have happened. I think Elder Zhu is right. The 10,000 demons should pay the most. The one who said this was the Sword Faction's Elder Duan Tianbua, who was ranked 4th in the righteous sections. That's right. That's right. A group of righteous sects echoed, and they all pointed their spears at the 10,000 demons. The expressions of the demons kept changing. Logically speaking, they should be supporting the 10,000 demons, but only the 10,000 demons could be used against them. If they had to pay more, then so be it. After all, the 10,000 demons had a lot of money, so this amount of money was nothing. Yu Qianqiu finally understood. No wonder he saw Qiu Wuyuan's face the moment he came in. He had become the target of everyone's attacks. Sigh. Yan Bugui had caused trouble, and now the 10,000 demons had become the scapegoat. It was really hard on Qiu Wuyuan, who had been running around outside. Duan Tianbua, you're not a good person either. You call yourself a righteous sect, but you're faster than anyone else when something happens. Fine. If you think that this has nothing to do with your sword faction, then please withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We the 10,000 demons will pay for your sword faction's money. Qiu Wuyuan pointed at Duan Tianbua's nose and scolded him. Then, he looked around at the crowd and patted his chest loudly. If the righteous sects think that this has nothing to do with you, you can all withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We the 10,000 demons will pay for the righteous sects' money. A bunch of shameless people who call themselves righteous sects, tui. Qiu Wuyuan argued with the crowd. He was so angry that his face was red. After he said those harsh words, a few righteous sects immediately stood up and said, Qiu Wuyuan, speak clearly. Who are you calling shameless? I'm calling a bunch of cowards. Whoever wants to cower in this matter, I'll scold them. Whoever wants to fight, I'll play with them. Qiu Wuyuan was too lazy to argue anymore. He could not argue clearly anyway. He would die of exhaustion if he kept arguing with so many people. He happened to glance at Yu Qianqiu just now, and his heart lit up. Although he was not as good with words as Yu Qianqiu, and could always reason, he could learn from Yu Qianqiu and act shamelessly, right? Who can still snatch money from me? As soon as the righteous sects stood up, there was no need to mention the 4 generals of the demon clan. A few other sects from the demon clan also stood up. It was fine if they just talked about it, but if they really fought, the other sects from the demon clan would definitely not let the 10,000 demons suffer losses. This time it was lively. As one of the sects stood up, the second one stood up. In the end, the situation of the 10,000 demons alone became a situation where the righteous and the demon clan were fighting. Qiu Wuyuan's pressure was instantly reduced. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin and watching the show. He thought to himself, no wonder this guy could always stir up big trouble with just a little bit of it. This shameless method was just a try. And immediately one family's problem became everyone's problem. At the same time, he could also save himself some trouble. It was worth learning. The situation was a little out of control. The 4 great clans had always been neutral. They did not belong to the demon clan or the righteous clan. A few people looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin, and decided to just watch the show. Yu Qianqiu was very happy in his heart. The representatives from the various sects really did not disappoint the sections. They did their best to fight for the greatest benefits for their sections. Everyone, please calm down. I have an idea, but I don't know if everyone is willing to listen to it. Quan Deming from Fuxian Island saw that the commotion was getting out of hand. He frowned and thought for a while, then immediately shouted. Hearing that there was an idea, and it might even be related to their sects, everyone immediately quieted down and looked at Quan Deming. The latter waved his hand and said, Everyone sit down. It's not a solution to keep arguing like this. Listen to me slowly. Qiu Wuyuan took the lead and sat down first. After everyone started arguing, he did not say anything. Instead, he stayed out of it. The people from the various sects also sat down one after another. Chapter 389. Quan Deming stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. He scanned the crowd and said slowly, "If possible, the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects should share the 1 billion. Before he could finish, Yuan Jiokui laughed and said, "That's not a good idea. How can our wealth compare to your supporting Immortal Island? This seems to be unfair." "Brother Yuan, why don't you listen to Elder Quan first? I believe Elder Quan won't speak without thinking." Qiu Wuyuan stopped him. In fact, even if there was nothing else, he would agree with this. 20 sects would share 1 billion, and each sect would only get 50 million. This was worth it. "All right, I'll listen to supporting Xian Island's opinion." Yuan Jiokui smiled disapprovingly. Quan Deming nodded and said, 1 billion is not a small number, but it would be a joke to ask the entire Chinese cultivation world to share it. My suggestion is that supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons each contribute 100 million. Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect each contribute 50 million. Our 6 sects will take 400 million, and the remaining 600 million will be shared by the other 14 sections. What do you all think? Hearing this, other than the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects, the other sects all nodded in agreement. They were not allowed to contribute even 1 spiritual stone. It would be strange if they didn't agree. "I think it's fine." Qiu Wuyuan also stood up and patted his chest. 10,000 demons will contribute this 100 million. 100 million was far better than 10,000 demons. Plus, 10,000 demons was the leader of the demonic sects. So it was reasonable for them to contribute a little more than the other sections. A leader should have the bearing of a leader. "I think it's fine. The Daluo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect naturally wouldn't have any objections. First of all, Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons offered twice as much as them. Second, with their status in the cultivation world, offering 50 million was just an average amount. If they still had any objections, it would be too unreasonable. The other 14 sects felt that it was not worth it. The 600 million would be divided among the 14 sects, and each sect would have to share more than 40 million. It was not much different from 20 sects sharing it equally, but most people agreed. It would not be difficult for them to fork out this amount of money. In addition, the few leading sects had already agreed, so it would not be good for anyone to say no. Thus, it was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. "Elder Quan, since we have all paid, how should we divide the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones if we win?" Yuan Jiokui suddenly asked. The other sects also stared at Quan Deming. "That's right." The matter of splitting the money had to be made clear, otherwise there would be problems later on. "That's easy," Quan Deming said eloquently. "There are only 20 matches in total. Since 20 sects have paid up, I believe that it won't be a problem for 20 of our sects to randomly send out 20 people. The 20 sects that have paid up can all send their people up to fight. If they win, the sect that pays the money will take back the money that the other sects have to share. The 1 billion earned will be divided into 20 portions. As long as the sect wins 1 match, they will get 50 million. The number of matches they win will be the same. If the sect wins all 20 matches, they will take all the 1 billion earned. My supporting Immortal Island will not have any objections. If we lose in the end, everyone can only admit that they are useless. They will definitely not give us the money for free." Aha! Everyone roared with laughter. This was a fair method, so no one had any objections. At least if they won, they would not lose money. In addition, of course, the more effort they put in, the more benefits they would get. This logic was reasonable everywhere. Just when everyone thought the problem had been solved, Yuan Jiokui suddenly stood up and said, "I still feel that something is wrong." This was a good method, and it was already considered fair. What was wrong with it? Qiu Wuyuan turned around and said with a slight frown, "Brother Yuan, could it be that you have another brilliant idea?" Yuan Jiukuei pointed at the four major families and said in a clear voice, "The combined strength of the four major families is not weaker than some of the top 10 sections. I think the four major families should also participate. The remaining 600 million will be divided equally among the 15 families. Each family will get 40 million, which is just right." He suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could he easily believe the words of that scoundrel, Yu Qianqiu? But he had tacitly agreed not to pursue the matter. Thinking about it, he felt uncomfortable. When he remembered that the four major families were on the same side as Yu Qianqiu, he came up with this idea. If they won this challenge, they could talk about it later. If they lost, they could let the four major families lose some money. It could also make those people feel disgusted. Everyone knew that Yuan Jiukuei still had grievances in his heart. They all looked at the four major families. Presumably, the four major families would not be able to refuse in this situation. Sure enough, Bai Shan stood up and said, "Although the four major families do not belong to the righteous or demonic sects, we are also part of China. It is reasonable for us to contribute money." After saying that, he sat down. This was also a sign of agreement. Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. He was worried that he could not find an excuse to intervene and make money. Now the opportunity came to him. That kid outside did not beat him for nothing. Since the four major families have agreed, if there is no other objection, then this matter is settled. Quan Deming asked Qiu Wuyuan, "Elder Qiu, what do you think?" "I have no objection. Just let me know when you want to pay. 10,000 demons will not refuse." Qiu Wuyuan laughed. He was in a good mood now that a troublesome matter had been solved. Quan Deming nodded and said to the crowd, "The other party has more than 50 experts in the crossing calamity stage, and 2 in the final stage. If you want to take this opportunity to make money, you might as well call for experts from your sect. This is much faster than us working hard to earn spirit stones from the spirit stone mine." Everyone laughed and suddenly became spirited, as if it was not difficult to make money. Most people felt that this matter did not concern them, and finally did not have to worry. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed, leaving a large pile of praying mats on the ground. Naturally, the unlucky disciples on duty would come to clean it up. Ignoring the strange gazes of the outsiders, Yu Qianqiu and the others followed Bai Shan to the Bai family's shop. They had something to discuss. There were some decorations here, so their conversation would not be easily overheard. The shopkeeper of the Bai family's shop had already heard about Yu Qianqiu beating people at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. He was speechless when he saw him. It was hard to imagine how the family could be entangled with such a person. After leading them to the back, the shopkeeper left. The matters of the higher-ups were not something that a shopkeeper like him could care about. The date set by the Cultivation Alliance in Yanbugui was tomorrow. Remembering that the other party had 2 experts in the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, after a discussion, Bai Shan said solemnly, "Since we have agreed to participate, we must prevent accidents. I will send a message back now and ask the family to invite 2 elders to come here overnight in case of emergencies." The others also nodded and felt that this was appropriate. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and laughed. "That is too troublesome. Why bother 2 elders to come here overnight? I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it." Wasn't he talking nonsense? If he said it, how could the people of the 4 families not let him say it? The attitude of the 8 people immediately became respectful. Bai Shan cupped his hands and said, "If you have something to say, please say it. We are all ears." "Ha ha ha ha." Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop laughing shyly. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. After a while, he rubbed his hands and said, "This is what I think. For this challenge, the 4 families just need to put their names on it. I will pay the 40 million, and Ze and I will fight. You don't have to worry about it. As for that if we win, haha, you know that I am a little short of money. We can keep the money we win for the time being. What do you think of my idea?" "For money again." The few people looked at each other. Bai Shan looked at him and said suspiciously, "I wonder what stage has Mr.'s cultivation reached? Please tell us so that we can be prepared." "Haha." Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "I am really ashamed. I am still in the early stage of nascent soul. The few people looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although it was already very fast for him to reach this stage at his age, this challenge was not a trivial matter. It was not a matter of life and death. Bai Shan shook his head and said, "Please forgive me, mister. I dare not let you take this risk. If there is any accident, I really can't explain to the family." "What are you afraid of? Isn't Luo Qingtian at the crossing calamity stage? Didn't you still lose to me in the end? You don't have to worry. It is settled. Send the news back. If the four families have any objections, let them come to me. You don't need to explain anything." Yu Qianqiu seemed to be more interested in money than his life. He turned around and said to Zi, "Zi, I will leave the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to you. Do you have the confidence to win?" "Yes." Zi nodded. At the side, Bai Zizong and the other three looked at Zi with complicated expressions. There was a hint of admiration in their gazes. She was beautiful, pure, and had an extraordinary temperament. In addition, she had a high cultivation base and a mysterious background. She was indeed quite tempting. This time, the four of them had been sent here to build a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, at the same time, they had received a rather ambiguous mission. If possible, it would be best if they could develop feelings for Zi. Other than Wu Liqing, the other three were a little unwilling at first, because they had never seen her before. Who knew what kind of person she was? But they also knew that for a big family like theirs, sometimes they couldn't make decisions about relationships. However, when they saw Zi, they were all attracted. They didn't expect a cultivator in the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to be so young and beautiful. They were immediately attracted. However, such a beautiful woman was ordered around by Yu Qianqiu as a maid. It was really a pity. However, they were relieved. Yu Qianqiu clearly didn't have any other relationship with Zi. When you attack, don't be soft. If you can kill them, don't let them go. Even if you let them go, they won't be grateful. Before you go, think about what my master did when 16 soul-forming cultivators joined hands to fight against him. As long as they are your opponents, don't let any of them go. Don't be soft. Kill them all. Yu Qianqiu warned earnestly. He was afraid that Zi would be soft, because she didn't have much experience. In a battle of life and death, she would be at a disadvantage. This girl was most convinced by Bai Changchun. At this time, he could only bring up Bai Changchun to strengthen her confidence. However, when these words fell into the ears of the four families, they were shocked. They all knew who Yu Qianqiu's master was. In other words, their ancestors' cultivation was so strong that it was shocking. Chapter 390. Ziyi's gaze instantly became firm, and she nodded her head seriously. Bai Shan cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Qianqiu excitedly. "Sir, can you tell us in detail about the Battle of the East Sea that you mentioned just now?" The people of the four great clans all cast expectant gazes at Yu Qianqiu. The legendary Battle of the Soul Formation stage was indeed worthy of admiration. Furthermore, the most powerful protagonists were their own relatives, so the anticipation was even stronger. "Tell you in detail?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought to himself, "I heard it from Nongzhu, that old handsome guy. How can I tell you in detail?" He looked serious and sighed. "I can only be fascinated. It's indescribable, indescribable. That kind of realm is beyond our reach. Let's not talk about it." Zi rarely spoke in front of outsiders. At this moment, she clenched her fists and said in a woman's voice, "Elder Bai is undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. Zi will admire you for life." Her words were even more inspiring than Yu Qianqiu's. The people from the four major families were extremely excited, especially the people from the Bai family. They blushed and couldn't express their emotions for a long time. "Ah, Zi, let's go back." Yu Qianqiu turned around and kept shaking his head and sighing as if he had really seen the battle. Zi followed him and left, leaving the people from the four major families to daydream. They imagined how the thin elder in the portrait in the ancestral hall of their family looked in reality. He was undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. "If I can't see our ancestor once in this life, I, Bai Zizong, will regret it for the rest of my life." Bai Zizong, who had been standing in silence for a long time, suddenly said while gritting his teeth. Bai Shan let out a long sigh and said, "It's not easy to see our ancestor. Didn't you hear what your father said? The great ancestor was the punishment enforcer of the demon ghost realm, and lived in the center of the demon ghost realm. Even if you were at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage, you would not be able to go deep into the demon ghost realm, let alone the place where the great ancestor lived. If you really want to go, the only way is to rely on Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu is willing to introduce you, it shouldn't be a big problem." Bai Zizong suddenly turned his head and said, "Third uncle, if Li Cheng and the other three could be personally taught by our ancestor, once we succeed in our cultivation, we would be able to learn 1/100th of our ancestor's abilities. Who in the Chinese cultivation world would dare to make things difficult for us? I don't understand why the old ancestor would not care about his own descendants and instead accept an outsider as a personal disciple. Could it be that none of us descendants can enter the old ancestor's eyes?" This sudden statement stunned the people of the four families. Tan Fei, Wu Liqing, and Jingzhou all breathed rapidly. Needless to say, it would be beneficial to be taught by the great ancestor of the world's #1 expert. When the four heirs thought of the extraordinary purple dress following beside Yu Qianqiu, their expressions became a little strange. "How dare you?" Bai Shan suddenly shouted. "Bai Zizong, are you out of your mind? How can the great ancestor's thoughts be guessed by ordinary people? The great ancestor must have his own reasons for doing this. It's not something you can comment on. Third uncle, don't tell me you still don't understand." Bai Zizong pointed in the direction where the two of them went and said angrily, "Who is the hidden force behind him? Could he really comprehend such a mysterious and strange technique by himself? Who gave him those 2 treasured sabers? Without a doubt, all of these were given to him by the great ancestor. Otherwise, how could a lowly disciple like him surpass our cultivation base in such a short period of time? He dares to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world because he has the great ancestor's support. I don't understand why the great ancestor would do this. Jealousy always makes people lose their minds easily. When Yu Qianqiu was just a lowly disciple, Bai Shan could still bow down to him. Now Yu Qianqiu was higher than him in every aspect. Even his seniority was higher than him. When he saw that Zi was obedient to Yu Qianqiu's words, an unknown fire completely ignited the dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Wu Liqing and the other two had similar thoughts, they never had such strong feelings. They were stunned by Bai Zizong's words. They did not expect Bai Zizong to say something like this. Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping, and Wu Onfing looked at each other. Bai Shan was trembling with anger. He pointed his finger and yelled, "Bastard, kneel down!" Bai Zizong clenched his teeth and kneeled in front of Bai Shan. His expression showed his unwillingness. Bai Shan said bitterly, "Without the great ancestor, there would be no 4 major clans. Jealousy blinds your eyes. You can't achieve anything. How dare you talk about the great ancestor's right and wrong? Do you think you're qualified to take over the Bai clan in the future? You treacherous bastard, slap yourself." Slap, slap, slap. Bai Zizong slapped his own mouth without saying anything. He slapped his own mouth again and again. Wu Liqing and the other two did not know what to do. Tan Huazong and the other two quickly advised, "Brother Bai, it's enough to teach him a lesson. It's understandable for a young man to say something rash. You don't have to go overboard." Bai Zizong, who was slapping himself, suddenly stopped. He touched his face, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He kowtowed to Bai Shan and said, "Third uncle, I know I'm wrong. I was blinded by jealousy just now and said something rash. Please forgive me." The few of them were speechless by his sudden change. Yanbu Gui, and the Cultivation Alliance's challenge location, was in a mountain not too far away from the 100 Flowers Valley. To be exact, it should be in a valley surrounded by mountains. It took some effort to choose this place. People could stand around and watch, and the spacious valley in the middle was just right for the fight. There were probably thousands of people on the surrounding mountains. This was the result of the sects restraining their disciples. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to watch the fight. On Yanbu Gui's side, there were about 50 people including himself. From their clothes, most of them were cultivators from other clans. These dozens of people stood on the mountain top, facing the mini cultivators. But they did not show any fear. It was as if they were looking down on the cultivators of China. Both sides had already sent people to the middle to discuss the start of the fight. Ever since Yan Bugui found out that Yu Qianqiu was among the crowd on the opposite mountain top, his eyes rarely moved, filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this guy, his family wouldn't be in such an awkward situation. The husband and wife couldn't be together. They colluded with other clans to protect themselves. And even their sect became enemies. Now that they had reached a point where it was either win or die, there was no way out. How could Yu Qianqiu not notice Yan Bugui, who was the center of attention? Seeing that he kept staring at him, he didn't want to compete with Yan Bugui with his stare. But it was uncomfortable to be stared at like that. He looked around and found the position of the 10,000 demons. They were not far away, so he slowly walked to the side of Qiu Wuyuan and bowed. "Greetings, Senior Qiu." Greetings. Qiu Wuyuan looked him up and down. When did this guy become so proactive? It seemed like he was always the one looking for him first. Therefore, with a stomach full of questions, he asked, "Brother Yu, are you looking for me?" The 10,000 demons also looked at him. Haha, nothing. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a face full of smiles. The weather today is really good. The 10,000 demons were not in a good mood. None of them were happy that the son of the previous sect leader had caused such trouble. Thinking about the possibility of fighting him again, they felt even more depressed. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu came over to talk about the weather. The group looked at the sky and felt that it was normal. They didn't notice anything special, but they suspected that there was a deeper meaning behind his words. They were all confused. "Are you really okay?" Qiu Wuyuan asked doubtfully. I'm fine. Yu Qianqiu confirmed it again. Then, he was too lazy to talk nonsense beside Qiu Wuyuan. He seemed to be chatting happily with the 10,000 demons from time to time, creating a harmonious atmosphere. The 10,000 demons reluctantly answered him. They didn't have the mood to talk nonsense with him now. But when this scene fell into the eyes of Yan Bugui, who was on the opposite mountain, he was so disgusted that he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. What the hell is this guy doing? Qiu Wuyuan cursed silently. The more Yu Qianqiu said that he was fine, the more suspicious he became. He and Yu Qianqiu had known each other for a long time. At that time, Yu Qianqiu hadn't joined Fuxian Island yet. Once they met, Yu Qianqiu started to flatter Qiu Wuyuan. Qiu Wuyuan already knew that this guy wasn't a good person. What happened later also confirmed his guess. Now that he suddenly acted like this, Qiu Wuyuan started to look around suspiciously. When his eyes met the hateful eyes on the opposite mountain, he was stunned. Then, he understood everything. This guy was obviously using the 10,000 demons to make Yan Bugui angry. He was vicious. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was still talking nonsense with the 10,000 demons. His expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Yu Qianqiu, you've achieved your goal. Go back to your position." Senior Qiu, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianqiu pretended to be confused. "Please go back." Qiu Wuyuan raised his hand and said bluntly, "The dignified myriad demon's palace, the leader of the demonic path, had been used by this fellow like a bunch of blind people. How could they possibly have the nerve to explain themselves so clearly?" Yu Qianqiu's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, "It seems that I'm not welcome in the 10,000 demons. I originally wanted to shamelessly ask to join the 10,000 demons after the competition. That's why I came here to get in touch with you guys. It seems that I was thinking too much. Elder Qiu, please help me thank Palace Leader Bu for inviting me in person. It's not that I don't know what's good for me, but the threshold to join the 10,000 demons is too high. Yu Qianqiu can't cross it. Goodbye." He waved his hand and walked away. The 10,000 demons looked at Qiu Wuyuan in surprise. For someone like Yu Qianqiu, who had mysterious skills and a spiritual treasure, the 10,000 demons couldn't wait to recruit him. "Why did you chase him away?" One of the late tribulation cultivators who rushed here overnight asked in a low voice. "Qiu Wuyuan, what's going on?" Qiu Wuyuan was speechless. He thought to himself, did I really think too much and misunderstand? If this guy really wants to join the 10,000 demons, Then I. Chapter 391. Some people who were paying attention to Yu Qianqiu saw him strolling to the 10,000 demons side and chatting happily with the top demonic factions people. But for some reason, he came back with a long face. The people from the 4 clans looked at each other. Ziyi stared at him for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly said, "Nothing. I just solved a small problem." Ziyi frowned. Why was he still unhappy after solving the problem? She wasn't a talkative person, so she didn't ask. She followed everyone's gaze to the valley. The challenge was about to begin. Both sides seemed to have reached an agreement. Each side handed over 1 billion spirit stones to a middleman, the 10,000 demons. Right now, the only middleman that could be accepted by both sides was the 10,000 demons. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready, so there was nothing to be said. There wasn't even anyone to judge. It seemed that this kind of battle to the death didn't need anyone to judge. The rules had already been set. Apart from the people who escaped from the valley, the rest had no other choice. One of them died, and the other lived. It was easy to determine the winner and loser. However, once they went on stage, the possibility of them escaping was very low. No sect could afford to lose face like this. They would definitely punish the people who escaped after the battle. The top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sects had already gathered their experts, especially the supporting Immortal Island. They had 2 experts at the final stage of the Tribulation Passing Stage, and 10 experts at the Tribulation Passing Stage from the Cultivation Pavilion. Dongfangchang, Ao was one of them. It was obvious that the supporting Immortal Island was complacent and wanted to use this challenge to prove their position as the top sect in the world. The 10,000 demons, the leader of the demonic faction, was destined to be unable to compete with the supporting Immortal Island in this matter. Those who knew a little about the cultivation world knew that the supporting Immortal Island was in the hands of the Guan clan, while the 10,000 demons were in the hands of the Yin clan. Yin Bugui was the only son of the 10,000 demons' previous leader Yin Wuchen, and the current leader Bu Yunxiao's senior brother. If Yin Wuchen didn't die, the 10,000 demons wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After the spirit stones were handed over, the valley quieted down. There was only the sound of the mountain wind. Everyone was looking around, not knowing who would be the first to challenge, and who would be the first to accept the challenge. Damn, what were they waiting for? Yu Qianqiu looked around, wishing he could go up first. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low. If he went up first, his opponent's cultivation levels would be above the crossing tribulation stage. According to the rules, they wouldn't be able to challenge him, so going up first would be pointless. According to the rules, those with high cultivation bases could not challenge those with low cultivation bases, while those with low cultivation bases could challenge those with high cultivation bases. However, it seemed that the possibility of the second scenario happening was very low, because it was practically courting death. China's cultivation world didn't know much about the foreign cultivation world, so the sects wanted to send someone to explore the world first before making a move. Yin Bugui, on the other hand, knew the situation of China's cultivation world very well. He wanted to see who would go first before sending someone to deal with the challenge. This was one of the reasons why he was determined to win. The mentality of both sides caused a temporary stalemate. Yu Qianqiu decided to wait a little longer when he thought about the possibility of earning 50 million. If no one went up, he would let Ziyi go. At this moment, Dongfangchang, Ao of the supporting Immortal Island slowly took out a golden spear from his storage bag, attracting everyone's attention. It seemed like the supporting Immortal Island was going to be the first to fight. The supporting Immortal Island was known as the top sect in the world. It might not matter to other sects if this stalemate continued, but the supporting Immortal Island couldn't do this because it was the top sect in the world. Dongfangchang, Ao had been representing the image of the supporting Immortal Island for a long time, so he had to fight first. It's him again. Yu Qianqiu stared at Dongfangchang, Ao with a trace of pity in his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. Dongfangchang Ao was simply a desperate man of the supporting Immortal Island. He was always at the forefront. Sigh. Heroes would eventually reach their twilight, and even a fine horse would stumble. If this went on, he was destined to become a tragic figure. A figure flashed, and Dongfang Chang, Ao was already standing in the middle of the valley. The luxurious grass covered him up to his knees. He held his spear and shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator of the supporting immortal island, Dongfang Chang Ao, accepts the challenge. Who wants to die?" His last sentence was especially sonorous, and his voice echoed in the valley for a long time. "Good," someone shouted. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice, and saw Yu Qianqiu taking the lead in clapping and clamoring. Everyone was slightly stunned. Someone from the Cultivation Alliance immediately followed suit. Then, the cheers and applause were continuous, and the atmosphere was immediately livened up. Yu Qianqiu didn't mean anything else. First of all, there was finally someone to light up the fire. Second of all, Dongfang Chang Ao was a real man in his heart. The applause and cheers were not wrong for him. Zi looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. She didn't expect the crowd to have such a big reaction. Driven by the atmosphere, she couldn't help but applaud. Wu Liqing and the other two looked at Bai Zizong. Bai Zizong smiled bitterly at them and applauded. Dongfang Chang Ao tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. He nodded and thanked him. It was enough for a man to be cheered by another man for something that he had held onto for his whole life. In the end, he met Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons. These two represented the leaders of the righteous and evil sects. For the glory of their sects, they fought for everything and never gave in. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Dongfang Chang Ao with an inexplicable expression. He sighed slightly and looked away. This was the first time he gave in to Dongfang Chang Ao. Only the two of them could understand that kind of feeling. Yu Qianqiu's atmosphere was getting stronger. Dongfang Chang Ao's fighting spirit increased. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yan Bugui and the others on a mountain. He shouted, "Dongfang Chang Ao is here. Who wants to fight me?" Good. This time, there was no need for anyone to take the lead. The crowd had already pushed the applause and cheers to the climax. Yan Bugui retracted his resentful gaze from Yu Qianqiu. He looked around and snorted coldly. He slowly walked in front of a person and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Yan, I'm sure you've heard of this person. He can be considered a famous figure in Fuxian Island. His golden source spear is an upper-grade magical treasure. He rarely has a match, although your cultivation is similar to his. And the black dragon whip in your hand can more or less restrain the spear. Don't underestimate him. I'll leave this battle to you. I've long wanted to meet this person." The cultivator called Mr. Yin chuckled. He gently pulled on a long black whip that was tied to his naked upper body, and it smoothly slid into his hand before coiling into a bundle. He swept down from the mountain and stood about 10 meters away from Dongfang Chang Ao. He chuckled and said, "Xiushui country's tribulation-passing middle-stage cultivator, Yan Biao, is here to challenge you." As soon as he arrived, the surrounding area immediately quieted down. All eyes were focused on the two of them. When Dongfang Chang Ao saw the whip in Yan Biao's hand, he slightly raised his eyebrows. He raised his spear and shouted, "Foreign cultivator, how dare you mess with the Chinese cultivation world? Die!" The spear turned into a phantom and smashed down. Dongfang Chang Ao made the first move. With a loud boom, a long deep hole appeared on the ground. The air wave sent the surrounding weeds flying. Yan Biao couldn't be hit just like that. He had already disappeared. "I've long heard of Dongfang Chang Ao's great name. Now that I see it, you're so clumsy." The voice came from the sky. Yan Biao stopped in the air. The long whip in his hand had already been released. It was like a spirit snake flying in the air. It was extremely nimble. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked. The Chinese cultivation world was good at using flying swords, but this was the first time they had seen someone using a whip. The two late-stage tribulation-passing elders of Fuxian Island were called Jin Yan and Fan Benlei. Their faces revealed a faint trace of worry. The whip could restrain the spear. In addition, it could be used like a sword. They were afraid that Dongfang Chang Ao would be in danger. Dongfang Chang Ao didn't even raise his head. He straightened his spear and pierced the sky. Whoosh! A golden light shot out from the spearhead and shot toward Yin Biao. While Yin Biao was speaking, his hands were already forming messy hand seals. The long black whip coiled up in the air. The raised whip head was pitch black like a cone, as if it was refined from a beast's horn or tooth. When the golden light shot over, Yin Biao didn't dodge. He pointed his finger, and the long whip whizzed out. The cone-like whip head directly collided with the golden light. Bang! A wave of air exploded. The golden light shot out from the spear, was instantly defeated in the air. The long whip, however, shot toward Dongfang Chang'eo like an arrow. Everyone watching was shocked by the sharpness of the whip. At the same time, they were worried for the person below. Dongfang Chang'eo raised his head and took a glance. Then he shot into the sky and swung his spear horizontally. With a pung sound, he directly knocked away the whip and raised his spear to chase after Yin Biao in the sky. The latter smiled ferociously. He raised his hand and pointed. Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly felt that something was wrong. He quickly glanced to his left and right. Suddenly, he heard a whoosh sound coming from behind him. He looked back and saw that the whip that he had just knocked away was coming again. Bang! He turned around and raised his spear to knock the whip away again. But the whip was just knocked away. It bounced in the air and came back to life. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around him again. Dongfang Chang'eo didn't have time to care about Yin Biao. He waved his spear and fought with the strange whip. On the other hand, Yin Biao, who was in the air, only needed to control the whip with ease. Dongfang Chang'eo was already at a disadvantage. If this continued, he would consume too much of his true essence. If his reaction was a little slow, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu could see that Dongfang Chang'eo wasn't really inferior to that guy. The key was that the guy's whip was too strange. It couldn't be killed or broken. It was really entangled. Dongfang Chang'eo couldn't display his strength at all. Damn it! No one knew what would happen next. Losing one more round might decide the outcome of the battle. This was related to the ownership of 1 billion yuan. I've invested 40 million yuan. I can't lose money no matter what. Yu Qianqiu frowned. He suddenly turned to Bai Shan and asked, if someone threw a treasure down the mountain and happened to be picked up by Dongfang Chang'eo, it wouldn't be against the rules, right? Ah, Bai Shan looked at him in shock. He didn't know what he meant. Chapter 392. The people at the side immediately reacted and thought of his two unusually sharp sabers. Could it be that he wanted to throw his sabers out for Dongfang Chang'eo to use? It seemed that the sabers could not be taken away by others. Bai Shan pondered for a moment and said, if someone accidentally dropped something down the mountain, as long as they don't interfere with the battle, it shouldn't be considered a violation of the rules as to who picked it up and who used it. Accidentally, Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Shan and laughed, thinking to himself that this guy really knew how to talk. Looking back at the battle site, the crackling sounds echoed in the valley. Dongfang Chang'eo was still entangled with the whip. Whether it was the spear in his hand that was sharp enough to provoke or smash, it could not hurt the whip at all. Needless to say, to be able to resist the spear in Dongfang Chang'eo's hand, this whip must be an upper-grade magical weapon. The whip was strong and flexible in the air. The head and tail of the whip coordinated with each other to attack. As soon as the tip of the whip was knocked away by the spear, the tail of the whip pierced through the air, causing Dongfang Chang'eo to be extremely busy. It was as if he was in a muddy pond, unable to escape and unable to use his strength. He did not even have the chance to fight with Yin Biao. However, it was not easy for the whip to hit Dongfang Chang'eo. At least under the situation where Dongfang Chang'eo could still sustain his energy consumption, no matter how fierce the whip's attack was. It could not get close to him. However, Yin Biao was still smiling as he looked at Dongfang Chang'eo, who was entangled with the whip. He was very leisurely making hand seals. Great! Yen Bugui and the others at the mountain top also applauded and cheered. If this continued, they would definitely win the first round. The people of the Cultivation Alliance did not look too good, especially those from supporting Xian Island. Losing the first battle would not only affect the Huaxia cultivation world and supporting Xian Island, But also Dongfang Chang'eo would have to live in seclusion on supporting Xian Island for a long time. He would never be able to represent supporting Xian Island again. Hearing the arrogant shouts coming from the other side, Dongfang Chang'eo was enraged. He knew what it would mean if he lost this battle. Therefore, with a red face, he let out a loud shout, then consumed a great deal of Zhen Yuan to continuously shoot out a sharp golden light from the spearhead. Finally, he managed to force the snake-like whip to retreat for a while. His bloodshot eyes glared at the sky, and Dongfang Chang'eo seized the chance to quickly raise his spear and charge forward. Yan Biao was shocked. Actually, he himself was clearly aware that if he didn't rely on the sharpness of his whip, his strength would probably be much inferior to his opponent. Now that his opponent had not completely fallen into a hopeless situation, he ignored the rapid consumption of Zhen Yuan and escaped. He didn't have any magical treasures in his hands. Once his opponent caught up with him, wouldn't it be a dead end? He quickly made hand seals to recall the black dragon whip, and his body also quickly dodged. The golden light from Dongfang Chang'eo's spear barely brushed past his feet, and Yan Biao was immediately scared out of his wits. What a fast speed! His opponent's strength was indeed a notch higher than his. Just a little bit more, and he would have lost both his feet. Yin Bugui and the others were also shocked. Since his opponent had dodged, he had already lost the chance to chase after him. The long whip had already caught up with him, and Dongfang Chang'eo was once again trapped in the shadow of the whip. He also understood that once the counterattack just now failed, his opponent would not give him a chance to suddenly get close to him again. The sudden change in the situation made the Cultivation Alliance's morale rise. They didn't expect that they would still fail, and their hearts fell to the bottom again. How could everyone not see that Dongfang Chang'eo probably had no chance to win anymore? And now it was just a battle of attrition. Countless people shook their heads in pity for Dongfang Chang'eo. He was obviously strong, but he was tormented by a whip until he couldn't use his strength. They were afraid that the outcome was already decided. Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons had been staring at the figure entangled by the whip in midair. His eyes were wide open, and they were also bloodshot. His fists were clenched so tightly that there was a muffled sound, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. His opponent of many years might die in such an unjust battle. He suddenly felt that there was a stuffiness in his chest that he couldn't breathe out, and he was about to suffocate to death. He didn't know why either. The situation was grim. It's time to negotiate. Dongfang Chang'eo, you'll have to fight one more time. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips. While everyone was watching with rapt attention, he walked out swaggeringly, and slowly walked to the side of the people from supporting Xian Island. There was still someone in the mood to stroll at this time, and it naturally attracted many people's attention. It was this guy again. Previously, he went to the 10,000 demons side, and this time, he came to supporting Xian Island's side. What was he trying to do? Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. The mountain was a little sloped, and he stood under the eyes of the people from supporting Xian Island, silently watching Dongfang Chang'eo brandishing his long whip. The people from supporting Xian Island looked at each other, not knowing what this guy was doing here at this time. Quan Deming was currently the representative here, and he couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianqiu, what's the matter? Yu Qianqiu looked back in a daze, and then looked left and right as if he had accidentally walked here. He immediately walked up and moved to Quan Deming's side, cupped his fist slightly and said, Elder Quan, I have something to ask. I noticed that Elder Dongfang's strength is obviously stronger than Yan Biao, but his spear is restrained by that long whip. I have something I don't understand. Don't you have any treasures that can break this long whip? If you do, why not throw it into the battlefield now? As long as you don't interfere with the duel, it won't be against the rules. Quan Deming turned around to look at the two consecrators behind him and frowned. I don't know what this whip is made of, but it's soft and not strenuous at all. It's not something that can be countered by ordinary treasures, unless there's an exceptionally sharp treasure that can break it in one fell swoop. It's not that our supporting Xian Island doesn't have such treasures, but they aren't in our hands at the moment, and it's too late to go back and get them. At this point, Quan Deming suddenly stopped talking, and everyone from supporting Xian Island also looked at Yu Qianqiu. Speaking of the sharpness of treasures, who had seen a treasure sharper than Yu Qianqiu's sabers? Even the sword of De Luo Sec's sect master was easily cut into 3 pieces, so it shouldn't be a problem to deal with this whip. Everyone's eyes lit up, but they immediately remembered that not everyone could pick up the sabers. Dongfang Chang'eo had also tried, but he couldn't pick it up at all. Thinking about it was a waste of time, and everyone shook their heads in regret. Yu Qianqiu nodded, and he rubbed his chin as he muttered, "Speaking of spears, I do have a treasure spear here. Although it's not as strong as my sabers, its sharpness isn't inferior to the sabers, and it might even be better. I just don't know if it can break this long whip." He wasn't afraid that people from other sects would hear him, because if someone released their divine senses to listen in, they would be discovered by supporting Xian Island. His words were no less than a sweet bait, and everyone's eyes lit up. There was actually a treasure spear that was sharper than his sabers, so how could it not break the long whip? Quan Deming was astounded and he asked, "Yu Qianqiu, is what you said true?" Yu Qianqiu silently turned around, and he frowned. "Elder Quan, this isn't the first time we've met, so when have you seen me lie?" His tone was a little unhappy. "That's not what I meant," Quan Deming explained. "What I meant was, can you take out your treasure spear and let us take a look at it?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation of the battle, and he reckoned that Dongfang Chang'eo would be able to hold on for a while longer. Thus he shook his head and sighed, "Sigh. I have a few good treasures with me, and they were all given to me by a senior. He once told me that unless it's an emergency, I can't simply show these treasures to others, and I can't give them to others to use without permission. I've already promised him, so it's not convenient for me to break my promise. May I know which senior it is? Why don't you tell us? Perhaps he has a good relationship with supporting Xian Island," Quan Deming said. "He has been in seclusion for many years, so I'm afraid you won't know him." Yu Qianqiu thought of a person, and he casually made up a story, Nanming Old Ancestor. While Quan Deming was still thinking, the 2 consecrators at the end of the tribulation passing stage behind him exclaimed, "What? It's him!" Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. F***CK. I've blown my trumpet. There's really someone in supporting Xian Island who knows Nanming Old Ancestor? Quan Deming turned around and bowed. "Consecrators, is there really such a person? Why haven't I heard of him before?" Jin Yen said with a solemn expression, "It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person was a person from over 1,000 years ago, and he was a wandering cultivator who hid in the cultivation world. Over 1,000 years ago, when the sect leader of supporting Xian Island went out for a tour, he coincidentally met an expert at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Not only was this person's cultivation level profound, but he was also a top-notch expert in smithing. His smithing skills were simply extraordinary and wonderful. Sect leader Ren wanted to befriend him, but the other party was unwilling to acknowledge him. In the end, sect leader Ren asked for his name, but the other party only said, Nanming Old Ancestor, and left. After that, supporting Xian Island sent people to secretly investigate this Nanming Old Ancestor. But it's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet him again." "That's right." Fan Benlei nodded and said, "Most people don't even know about this. I've only seen it in the secret records of Nurturing Heart Pavilion." According to sect leader Ren's description, with the smithing skills of that Nanming Old Ancestor, it shouldn't be difficult for him to forge a treasure spear. But this was already a matter from over 1,000 years ago. If this person is really still alive, then wouldn't he be over 1,000 years old? When everyone heard this, they immediately thought of a possibility. If that person was still alive, wouldn't his cultivation level have already reached the legendary soul formation stage? Think about it. Even if Yu Qianqiu was spouting nonsense, it couldn't be so coincidental. Putting aside the fact that the name was the same, to be able to take out such a treasure, wouldn't it coincide with the secret of Nanming Old Ancestor being a smithing expert? Like I said, I've only heard of this Nanming Old Ancestor from He Li. How could you possibly know him? Yu Qianqiu's brows moved slightly, and he suddenly sighed and said, Your sect leader Ren really missed the opportunity to meet Nanming Old Ancestor. This Nanming Old Ancestor, he loves spirit stones. If supporting Xian Island's sect leader Ren could lure him with spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to make him stay on your supporting Xian Island. Sigh. He did give me some treasures, but it's a pity that he forced me to search for spirit stones for him. I'm really worried to death. If Nanming Old Ancestor really heard this, he would probably jump in anger. Who said I love spirit stones? I don't even know who you Qianqiu are. When did I force you to search for spirit stones? Chapter 393. Ancestor Nanming likes spirit stones? The people of supporting Immortals Island finally understood why Yu Qianqiu and the purple-clothed lady were so frantically accumulating wealth after their appearance. It turned out that there was an inside story. Ji Nian and Fan Binlei looked at each other. While Yu Qianqiu was looking at the duel in midair, they gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming nodded his head in understanding. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, can we borrow that spear for a while? Yu Qianqiu paused and said with some difficulty, I know what you mean. You want to borrow the spear for Elder Dongfang to use, but I promised Ancestor Nanming that I can't easily take out the treasures he bestowed, and I can't let others use them without permission. Otherwise, it's very likely that he will take them back. Elder Quan, you have to know that I'm prepared to use these treasures to save my life at a critical moment. If they were to be taken back, what would I do when I encounter danger in the future? Most importantly, I've always kept my promises. You guys better think of another way. We can pay spirit stones to rent it from Ancestor Nanming. What do you think? Quan Deming said. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, Elder Quan, it's not that I don't want to promise you, but Ancestor is at the ends of the earth. Even if you rent it from him, I'm afraid that by the time you get the news that he agrees, it'll be too late. Do you think it's still necessary? Can you make this decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming? Quan Deming asked. Me. Yu Qianqiu pointed at himself and then fell silent. He seemed to be thinking about something in the silence. After a while he nodded, but then he shook his head and said, As long as there are spirit stones, I can make the decision. But you guys don't know Ancestor Nanming's character. He won't care about a small amount. His appetite is a little big. It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty when he said this. Was it the Nanming ancestor whom he had never met that had a huge appetite? Or was it him who had a huge appetite? Quan Deming glanced at Dongfang Chang'ao, who was fighting in grief and indignation. With a firm expression he said, Name a number that the Nanming ancestor can accept. As long as it's not too outrageous, we won't make things difficult for you. The greatest significance of supporting Immortal Island's first appearance was not to win spirit stones, but to save face. For the number one sect in the world, reputation was sometimes more important than spirit stones. Ze and the people from the four major clans were no longer in the mood to watch the fight. From time to time, they would look at the people from supporting Xian Island. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was doing with the people from supporting Xian Island. He kept talking nonstop. As for Bai Zizong and the other three who were standing at the back, their gazes often stopped on the graceful silhouette of the lady in purple in front of them, sinking deeper and deeper. Yuan Jiuque from the Six Paths Demon Sect had questioned the disciple who was beaten yesterday, but that disciple refused to admit that he spat on Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yuan Jiuque's hateful gaze couldn't leave Yu Qianqiu today. Now that he had finished visiting the 10,000 demons side, he went to the supporting Xian Island's side. At first, he thought that this kid was really capable to be able to win over both the righteous and demonic sections. But now he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Jiuque looked at the scene doubtfully. Dongfang Chang'ao was in imminent danger, but the people from supporting Xian Island were busy chatting with Yu Qianqiu. Even the two consecrators in the final stage of the tribulation passing realm were hitting on him. This was like seeing a ghost. Could it be that supporting Xian Island wasn't worried about Dongfang Chang'ao's safety at all? Impossible. Dongfang Chang'ao represented the face of supporting Xian Island. This huge doubt made Yuan Jiuque feel as if he had been enlightened. He couldn't help but regret his impulsive actions yesterday. Supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were not kind people. Since the two sects in Yu Qianqiu were so accommodating, they must know something that others didn't. It seemed like he had to spend more effort to investigate. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret when he suffered a loss. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and pondered when he heard this. He thought to himself, I've played hard to get, so I'm not going to play anymore? Not only will they not believe me, they will also say that I'm greedy. It's not good to play too much. It'll be bad if I lose everything. So he let out a sigh and nodded solemnly. Okay, since Elder Quan has already put it this way, I'll brace up my courage and make a decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming. A fixed price of 50 million high-grade spiritual stones is really the lowest I can go. Ancestor Nanming really won't be interested in anything less than this. You can decide for yourselves. It would cost 50 million just to rent it. Even if supporting Immortal Island saved up this amount of money, it would still take many years. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other, but they couldn't delay any longer. Dongfang Chang, Ao's safety and supporting Xian Island's face were worth more than 50 million. Jin Yan said in a deep voice, Yu Qianqiu, I promise you on behalf of supporting Xian Island. However, I have to say something first. What if the spear isn't as sharp as you said, and we make a mistake? I've never lied. Is Senior doubting my credibility? Fine. I'll risk the treasure being taken back by Ancestor Nanming. I'll say this here. If the spear's sharpness isn't what I said, you don't have to give me a single spiritual stone. Yu Qianqiu's face was full of righteousness, and his words were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Jin Yan nodded. All right, it's settled then. However, we don't have that many spiritual stones on us, so we'll have to temporarily owe. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted him. It's fine to give it to you after the matter is over. I've been on supporting Xian Island for so many years, so I have some confidence in supporting Xian Island. However, I have to make it clear in advance that the spear can't be used by you indefinitely. It's only for Elder Dongfang's match. Supporting Xian Island had never thought of taking his things. Moreover, since Yu Qianqiu was so straightforward, Jin Yan immediately agreed. All right, let's use the spear. I have to remind everyone that Ancestor Nanming is afraid that people will pry into the secrets of the treasures he refined, so he set up extremely powerful restrictions on them. I've asked him to set up the same restrictions on my two treasured sabers, so you must not use your divine senses to check them. Once your divine senses come into contact with them, they'll be immediately damaged, Yu Qianqiu warned. Everyone from supporting Xian Island was astonished. It turned out that the reason why the two sabers could hurt people's divine senses was because of the restrictions. There was actually such a powerful restriction in this world. That Ancestor Nanming really wasn't someone an ordinary person could compare to. After everyone agreed, Yu Qianqiu put his hand into his storage bag. After searching for a while, he suddenly muttered strangely, Could it be that I forgot to bring it with me? That's impossible. When everyone heard this, they almost fainted. After wasting so much time talking, he actually said that he forgot to bring it with him. Jin Yan's face was ashen as he said, Yu Qianqiu, are you kidding me? Look carefully. Oh, I found it, Yu Qianqiu shouted. He didn't mean to dawdle, but the huge sabers that he made with his black flames were a little too crude. This time, since he was pretending to be the spear refined by Ancestor Nanming, he naturally had to look like a treasure spear. Otherwise, if they were all crudely made, it would be strange if they didn't suspect that they came from the same family. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to fool them, even if he wanted to. Thus, after some preparation, he put his hand into his storage bag and used his black flames to carefully suppress it. That was why he spent some time. Everyone from supporting Xian Island's gaze followed Yu Qianqiu's hand as it slowly moved. This action instantly attracted the attention of everyone on the surrounding mountains. What were those fellows from supporting Xian Island doing? Dongfang Chang, Ao was fighting with his life on the line. Could it be that they still had the mood to do something else? The spear's tail that was slowly pulled out was black. It was formed by two malevolent beast claws, and the fine scales on the claws were vivid and lifelike. The spear's tail had just been revealed, when a terrifying feeling of deterrence emanated from the storage bag. Yu Qianqiu suddenly pulled out the spear and casually inserted it into the ground beside him. With a pu sound, even the spear's tail could easily be inserted into the mountain rocks. The spear's body was about 2 meters long, and it was completely black. The spear's shaft was as thick as a child's arm, and it looked like it was covered in scales. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that there were 9 angry dragon carvings, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They looked as if they were about to leap out of the spear's shaft. From the front, the spear's blade looked like a flat dragon head opening its mouth and roaring angrily at the sky. The spear's blade had broken through the dragon's fangs and emerged from the dragon's open mouth. On top of the original 2-meter-long spear's body, there was a sharp edge that was half a meter long. The center of the spear bulged out while the edges were thin, and it even carried a dense barb. The spear's entire body was pitch black, and it didn't reflect any light in the sunlight. It was truly a mystery what it had been forged from. The moment this spear appeared, the people from supporting Xian Island felt like they had to retreat before even trying it out, and they couldn't help but gasp. Needless to say, just this meticulous carving and this concealed aura meant that this was undoubtedly a treasured spear. The people standing closer to the spear could clearly see the fierce spearhead and were left speechless. Those farther away were also trying to figure it out. Yu Qianqiu examined the spear's design and was very satisfied with it. In his rush just now, he had recalled the image of the red dragon in Twilight Valley and applied it to this spear. As expected, the spear's aura was extraordinary. How could he not praise such a masterpiece? Yu Qianqiu coughed and solemnly said, "When this spear first took shape, someone used it to kill a 9,000-year-old flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Afterwards, the Southbright ancestor placed 9 dragons on the spear's body, calling it the dragon-slaying spear. The dragon slayer who used this spear once praised that the supreme cultivator's treasured spear slays dragons. No one in the world dares to disobey, and the heavenly sword does not appear. The dragon-slaying spear? This spear once slaughtered a flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending." Fan Binlei said in disbelief. The people from supporting Xian Island also stared at the spear, and Jin Yin asked in shock, "The heavenly sword does not appear, and who can contend with it? Does this mean that there is another heavenly spear that can contend with the dragon-slaying spear? That heavenly sword refers to the heavenly sword, not the spear, but it's also incredibly sharp," Yu Qianqiu somewhat awkwardly explained. He thought to himself, "I can't talk nonsense anymore. If I continue, Great Hero Jin will be so angry that he transmigrates to settle the score with me." He quickly changed the topic and said, "Everyone, shouldn't you quickly hand the spear over to Elder Dongfang? If we continue to talk, I'm afraid there will be a problem." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Only now did they remember that they were only looking at the spear, and they neglected the desperate Dongfang Chang'eo. Jin Yin and Fan Binlei nodded at Quan Deming at the same time. Quan Deming grabbed the spear and instantly felt a bone-piercing cold. He couldn't help but praise, "Good spear." Everyone stepped aside, and Quan Deming walked out with the spear in hand. He transmitted his voice to Dongfang Chang'eo. "Elder Dongfang, don't panic. We have already found you the peerless godly weapon dragon-slaying spear. It will definitely be able to break that strange whip. You must remember, the restriction on this spear is extremely powerful. As long as you don't use your divine sense to check, you will definitely be able to use it safely." Chapter 394. Dongfang Chang'eo, who was trying his best to deal with Quan Deming, took the opportunity to take a glance. When he saw that Quan Deming was indeed holding a black spear in his hand, his spirit was lifted, but he was a little confused. He was good at using spears, so he paid more attention to all kinds of good spears. Where did the dragon-slaying spear come from? Why hadn't he heard of it before? When Yen Bugui saw the spear in Quan Deming's hand, his expression changed immediately. He could guess what was going to happen next. He transmitted a message to Yen Biao. "Be careful, Mr. Yen. Supporting Xian Island is going to send a spear into the battlefield. This spear might be able to break Mr.'s whip. You must not let it fall into the hands of Dongfang Chang'eo. Yin Biao stopped in midair. Although he looked relaxed, he didn't dare to get too close to Dongfang Chang'eo. He was constantly on guard, afraid that Dongfang Chang'eo would launch another sneak attack. He was really shocked just now. When he heard Yin Bugui's telepathic message, he looked towards the direction of supporting Immortals Island. As expected, there was someone holding a black spear. He couldn't help but smile and reply to Yin Bugui. Palace Master Yin is worrying too much. The black dragon whip in our hands is made from a flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. He extracted its tendons, peeled its scales, and refined its bones. How can it be broken by ordinary treasures? Yin Bugui saw that this guy was underestimating his enemy, so he reminded him again. Supporting Xian Island is not comparable to ordinary sections. The golden source spear in Dongfang Chang'eo's hands is also an upper-grade treasure. It's just that Mr.'s black dragon whip is able to restrain it. Now that they are taking out something to replace the golden source spear, it's definitely not an ordinary treasure. Mister, you must not be careless. Yin Biao was alert. The two people in the air were looking at the spear in Quan Deming's hand. All the sects also saw some clues and knew that supporting Xian Island had brought out a powerful treasure. Quan Deming looked at the position and transmitted a message. Elder Dongfang, get ready to pick up the spear. After saying that, he threw the spear. A black shadow drew an arc and landed on a protruding boulder at the bottom of the valley. The black spear was inserted into the rock at an oblique angle. There was almost no sound, only the black end of the spear was exposed. All the sects were shocked. It was indeed a treasured spear. Dongfang Chang'eo, who was fighting, was slightly delighted, while Yin Biao was slightly startled. Both of them immediately locked onto that gun. Hi! Dongfang Chang'eo shouted. He had waited for so long in order to think of a way. Now that his fellow sect members had come out to save him with a treasure, success or failure would all depend on the spear below. How could he not give it his all? The spear in his hand shot out 100 spear shadows with all his might. Golden light shone as he forced the black dragon whip away. In a flash he quickly descended. Dongfang, don't run. Yin Biao shouted. At this time he was also a little anxious. He made a hand seal, and the black dragon whip chased after Dongfang Chang'eo. Everyone's eyes were focused on the battle between the two. They knew that this was the crucial moment. About 100 meters above the ground, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly stopped, turned around, and used all his strength to shake off the long whip with his spear. Everyone thought that he would be able to pick up the spear below. Unexpectedly he raised his head and looked at Yin Biao, who was rushing down, and shouted, "Kill!" Then, he raised the golden origin spear and rushed towards Yin Biao. His imposing manner was incomparably valiant. The two of them rushed at each other, and their speed seemed to close in an instant. Yin Biao originally wanted to use the long whip to entangle Dongfang Chang'eo, so that he could keep the spear below to avoid any worries. Who knew that Dongfang Chang'eo would turn around and rush back, as if he had set up a trap for him to fall into. The sharp sound of the golden spear pierced through the air, and Yin Biao was almost scared out of his wits. He hurriedly turned around to escape, but it seemed that it was still a little too late. The two of them had already met, and following a cold snort from Dongfang Chang'eo, the golden spear drew out a rain of blood. Ah! Yin Biao screamed. One of his thighs was not able to dodge in time, and was cut off on the spot. The Cultivation Alliance immediately cheered, especially Qiu Wuyuan of 10,000 Demons, who was unusually loud and excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. This Dongfang Chang'eo was indeed Dongfang Chang'eo. As long as he was given a chance, he could immediately turn the situation around. This kind of wisdom and courage was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. It was no wonder that he could take on such a heavy responsibility in the world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island. Although Yin Biao had lost a leg, his life was still more important. He continued to run for his life, but his vitality was greatly injured, and his speed was already a lot slower. He desperately ran towards the direction of Yin Bugui and the others, shouting loudly, "Two senior brothers, save me!" Among the dozens of people, 2 people immediately rushed out to rescue him. Yen Bugui anxiously shouted, "Don't break the rules." But someone beside him pulled his arm. The two people could not care so much now. Their junior brother was about to die. Who would care about the rules? At worst, they could just admit defeat. However, the scene that the two of them were most worried about still appeared. Dongfang Chang'eo had already caught up to Yin Biao. His expression was as calm as still water, and he raised his spear above Yin Biao's head. The two of them immediately shouted, "Show mercy!" Yin Biao turned around in horror, only to see a ray of golden light flying towards him. Dongfang Chang'eo had just used the spear 3 times, and his movements were clean and neat. He was indeed someone who had used the spear for a long time. Ah! A few pieces of minced meat and blood fell to the ground accompanied by a shrill scream. Yin Biao was finished. The Cultivation Alliance once again cheered nonstop. "Junior brother!" The two people who were rushing over exclaimed. The two people raised their hands and pulled out whips that were exactly the same as Yin Biao's. Dongfang Chang'eo turned around and left, landing on the ground at the fastest speed. Not far away, he saw the ownerless long black whip lying quietly on the ground. He raised his hand and grabbed it, then directly threw it into his storage bag. This could be considered as his spoils of war. Seeing that the two people who pulled the whips were picking up the pieces of Yin Biao's body, he looked at the broken leg in front of him. He was afraid that the other party would not let this go so easily. Dongfang Chang'eo first took out an energy recovery pill and swallowed it. At the same time, he stuffed the golden origin spear in his hand into his storage bag. He turned around and grabbed the black spear handle on the boulder behind him. As he grabbed it, his eyes slightly widened. He suddenly pulled out the black dragon slayer spear that was stuck on the boulder and raised it to take a closer look. The long spear was cold and pitch black. The dragon claw held the spear's spine, and the 9 dragons roaming spear was like a raging dragon spitting out cold blades. The entire spear was almost covered by the fine scales of the dragon, and it looked extraordinary. In particular, there seemed to be a huge amount of power contained within it. That kind of terrifying power seemed familiar. Dongfang Chang'eo looked at the fellow sect members of supporting Xian Island in surprise. He had never heard of such a spear in the sect. If there was one, it would have been given to him long ago. He reckoned that it would not have dragged on until now. "Elder Dongfang, you have won the first round. The 2 consecrators have summoned you back." Dongfang Chang'eo suddenly received a voice transmission from Quan Deming. He nodded slightly and flew back to the people of supporting Xian Island in a flash. The surroundings were filled with cheers. The Cultivation Alliance had won the first round, and all the sects were cheering. "Elder Dongfang is indeed amazing," Yu Qianqiu praised happily. This really made him overjoyed. He had not even used the spear, and he had already earned 50 million. Even if he lost in the end, he could still earn 10 million. If he had known earlier, he would not have spent 40 million. Dongfang Chang'eo was startled. Why was this guy here? He nodded and did not say anything. However, Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and said, "Elder Dongfang, please return the Dragon Slayer spear to me." "This spear is yours." Dongfang Chang'eo looked at the fellow sect members in surprise. Finally, his eyes fell on Quan Deming. The latter nodded silently and said, "I borrowed it from Yu Qianqiu for emergencies. I promised him that I would return it to him after 1 round." This, Dongfang Chang'eo's eyes lingered on the spear. He was a little reluctant to part with it. After a little hesitation, he said decisively, "Yu Qianqiu, are you selling this spear?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, No, I won't sell it no matter how much money you give me. Elder Dongfang, please return the spear to me." At this moment, someone in the valley suddenly shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator. Yen Fang is here to accept the challenge. Dongfang Chang'eo, do you dare to come down and fight me?" Everyone from supporting Xian Island looked over. It was none other than one of Yin Biao's senior brothers. It seemed like he wanted to take revenge. Dongfang Chang'eo snorted and turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Yu Qianqiu, lend me the spear for 1 more round. I will return it to you after I use it." Chang'eo. Jin Yin stopped him and shook his head. Supporting Xian Island has to fight for the first round. Since we have already won, let the other sects do the rest. Supporting Xian Island only needs to make a move at the crucial moment. Dongfang Chang'eo stopped and pondered. He knew that the sects had their own considerations. He could not control his own impulse. He looked at the people at the foot of the mountain and gritted his teeth as he handed the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took it and touched it before stuffing it into his storage bag. He bowed to Jin Yan and said, "After the challenge ends, I will come back to find you." Jin Yan nodded with a gloomy expression. Just touching the spear had cost supporting Immortal Island 50 million. If he had known that Dongfang Chang'eo would kill like that, he would have just thrown something as a trigger. There was no need to waste so much money. Yu Qianqiu did not care so much. After leaving supporting Xian Island, he went back to the four families. Ziyi popped her head over and asked curiously, "I saw it just now. The gun that was thrown down seems to have been taken out by you?" Yu Qianqiu looked at her. It was good to have a high cultivation. So many people were blocking and yet she saw it. Actually, it was not just Ziyi who saw it. Many people saw it. Even if they did not see it, they would have guessed it. If supporting Xian Island really had a spear, they would have taken it out long ago. There was no need to surround him and take out a spear. If it was not his, who else could it be? Yan Biao's senior apprentice brother was still shouting, "What? Dongfang Chang'eo does not dare to come out. But the whole Chinese cultivation world does not dare to come out? Are you all cowards? Who will fight me?" He shouted and scolded for a long time. But no one from the sects came out. The key was that everyone knew how powerful the whip was from Dongfang Chang'eo's battle. Those with the same cultivation as Dongfang Chang'eo would not be able to deal with it better. And the cultivators in the final stage of tribulation passing couldn't come out because of the rules. For a moment, people from the sects looked at each other. That whip was troublesome. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right for a long time. Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, he could not help but laugh. Hee, since everyone is so polite, I won't be polite. Ziyi's eyes brightened. You want to go up? His fighting style was always so novel. She liked watching it. Hee, what do you think? We can't let people laugh at us Chinese cultivation world for not having anyone. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched as he drew a machete in each hand and shouted, "I'm coming." Chapter 395. To shout like that at this time, it would be the center of attention. Bai Shan still wanted to persuade him, but it was too late. A silhouette dashed down the mountain. He didn't fly, but rather he leaped. Holding two knives bigger than a human, he fanned himself and rushed down the mountain like a bat, his movements extremely fast. Although the crowd did not see clearly who it was. Who else could it be other than Yu Qianqiu, who came from the four great families and held such strange knives? All the sects looked at each other, speechless, and felt a little ashamed. So many sects, but no one came out to fight, forcing a guy who could not fly to run and jump down to fight. How could they not feel ashamed? They were afraid that they would not be able to avoid a round of humiliation. Yan Fang's junior brother died, and he wanted to find someone to vent his anger. But he did not expect that the one who came to challenge him was a guy who could not even fly, and looked very young. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, "Is there no one in China? Haha, young man, I don't kill nameless people. Seeing that your courage is commendable, I will spare your life. Quickly go back and call your elders." Hee, you don't know me, what a joke. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He did not stop and directly rushed over. Be careful. Yan Bugui suddenly shouted from the top of the mountain. The stumbling Yu Qianqiu ran all the way down, and was already close to Yan Fang. Yan Fang still did not know the opponent's background, and was still laughing. Hearing the warning, Yan Fang looked around and saw that the young man who rushed over did not say anything, but raised his knife and slashed at him. His movements were quite smooth. Yan Fang sneered disdainfully, waved the whip in his hand to block, and said in a deep voice, "It seems that I have to kill a nameless person today." His voice stopped abruptly. The black knife waved, and the snake-like black whip was cut into two. Yan Fang felt his neck cold, and his eyes opened wide in disbelief. But his vision had changed, and he saw his chin on the cold and wide knife. The young man did not hesitate to wave the other knife and split a headless body in half, and his vision gradually blurred. The whole place was silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to have quietened down. Only the words of the young man with the saber could be heard. Yu Qianqiu stood with his saber in front of him, looking at the head that had died with its eyes wide open. He said expressionlessly, "So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough." With a twist of the blade, the head fell off. Yu Qianqiu quickly went over to take the storage bag from the corpse and put it away. Then he turned around and ran back up the mountain with the two broadswords. What was the point of staying here if he didn't run after the fight? Safety first. When Yu Qianqiu ran back to the four great clans and put away the two sabers, everyone still felt as if they were in a dream. Running down just like that, chopping people down with one slash, then running back, and it was over just like that? Junior brother. A sorrowful howl came from the mountain where Yen Bugui was. The last of the three brothers landed in a flash. Good. The people of the Cultivation Alliance reacted and immediately cheered loudly. When had they ever seen such a classic battle? Going down the mountain only needed one slash to cut off the head of a mid-stage tribulation passing expert. And then turning back. It only took a moment. It was so cool that they had no words to say. Especially the last sentence. So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough. It pushed everyone's emotions to a climax. The applause was explosive, and Ze, who was stunned and then came back to her senses, kept clapping, looking at the people around her. Her face showed a smile that had never been seen before. Elder Bai's disciple was really extraordinary. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu came out in a straightforward manner, cupped his fists and bowed to the people around him, saying, I was lucky, I was lucky. What he got in return was even more intense cheers. A consecrator from the 10,000 demons was called Neo Senator. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and suddenly said to Qiu Wuyuan in a deep voice, Qiu Wuyuan. He originally wanted to join the 10,000 demons, but you chased him away. After this is over, you can go and ask Yu Qianqiu if he is still willing to join the 10,000 demons. Qiu Wuyuan nodded speechlessly. The people from the supporting Immortals Island were even more amazed, shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. This guy was just wandering around here. How did he come back with a saber in the blink of an eye and kill an expert in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage? Dongfang Chong, Ao recalled the scene of Yu Qianqiu cutting off the long whip with a saber inside. This saber is really extraordinary. I wonder how does that spear compare to it? In fact, everyone understood that the reason why Yu Qianqiu was able to kill with a saber was because the other party was careless and didn't know his background. He didn't expect that his whip could be easily cut off, so he lost his life. But for the Cultivation Alliance, this was something to gain face, so everyone was equally excited. They were right to think this way, but they didn't think about it. If it was an ordinary person who would dare to use a saber to kill someone in the crossing calamity stage with a nascent soul stage cultivation. In fact, Yu Qianqiu also thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect that the other party didn't know him. So he made a decision in the blink of an eye, kill him. People who can make such a prompt decision are not as easy as they say or think. An old man in embroidered clothes stood next to Yen Bugui. He had been staring at the purple clothes next to Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly asked, Is the person with the saber Yu Qianqiu that man who mentioned? Who else could it be other than that rascal? Yen Bugui stared at Yu Qianqiu and said with hatred, Yen Feng really underestimated his enemy too much. He was actually defeated so easily. It's not necessarily because Yen Feng underestimated his enemy. If it were me, I'm afraid I would also have made a mistake. It's the first time I've seen such a brave young man. No wonder he's so famous. The old man in embroidered clothes looked at Yu Qianqiu's eyes, revealing a sense of admiration, and asked, I heard that this Yu Qianqiu also defeated the head of China's Daoyuo sect, Luo Qingtian. Didn't you investigate his background? We did, but there's no way to find out. After this guy was expelled from Fuxian Island, he rarely appeared in the cultivation world. No one knows where he is, but he appeared again recently. Yen Bugui said. He disappeared for a period of time, but now he appears again. And he even has a treasure that ordinary people can't have? The old man in embroidered clothes looked at the purple clothes, then looked at Yu Qianqiu, and nodded thoughtfully. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Murderer, state your name. After the eldest senior marshal brother collected his junior marshal brother's corpse, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, Mid-stage tribulation passing cultivator. Yancheng accepts the challenge. Who dares to fight? This was clearly telling Yu Qianqiu to go down and fight him. Damn it! With so many people watching, you want me to go down just because you tell me to? Dongfang Chang'ao also killed your junior marshal brother. Why are you only looking for me? Am I easy to bully? Yu Qianqiu looked down expressionlessly, pretending that he didn't hear anything. In his heart, he was thinking that Fuxian Island wouldn't give up just like that, and they might even have to rent his spear. I was stupid just now. I can earn money for free. Why should I go down and do such a sinful thing? A bunch of cowards. Yancheng was so angry that he started cursing, and the more he cursed, the uglier it became. The more people heard, the uglier their faces became. Think about it, there were so many people here. And there were many people who were stronger than Yancheng, but no one came out to fight. This was really embarrassing. The key was that the opponent's whip was too powerful. Although they won the first 2 rounds, even if they asked Dongfang Chang'ao to go up, it would still be difficult for them to beat him. At the end of the day, no sect would be like Yu Qianqiu, running around with precious treasures. At present, they could only deal with the treasures in Yu Qianqiu's hands. Otherwise, they couldn't let Yu Qianqiu wait until they returned to their sects to pick out suitable treasures before they started fighting. The cursing was still going on, but no one came out to fight. Time was also passing, and if no one came out to fight after 2 hours, Yen Bugui would take the initiative to win. Not only would they get 1 billion spirit stones, they would also be able to damage the reputation of the Chinese cultivation world. At this moment, the 10,000 demons' faces were the ugliest. The leader of the righteous sects, Fuxian Island, had won the first round, but as the leader of the evil sects, the 10,000 demons, there was no response at all. After they returned, the prestige of the 10,000 demons in the evil sects would definitely plummet. Qiu Weiyuan was now a little uneasy and restless. He wasn't confident that he could deal with that strange whip, and if he didn't fight, how would the 10,000 demons face their fellow evil sects in the future? His restlessness fell into Yen Bugui's eyes, and a trace of bitterness flashed across Yen Bugui's face. He gritted his teeth and sent a telepathic message to Yancheng, who was below. The person who killed your junior brother is called Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu. Yancheng suddenly pointed his finger and shouted, You coward is Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. F***CK. Who told him? He immediately looked around, looking for any suspicious people. He believed that Yen Bugui's side, seeing that victory was in sight, and that they were about to reap rich benefits, would definitely not reveal his name and let Yancheng curse him. Instead, it was very likely that someone on his side was hoping that he would fight, so his name was leaked. His first thought was that he had been betrayed by someone on his side, but in the end, every sect he looked at was suspicious. Forcing me? The more it is like this, the more I won't go. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry, but Yancheng obviously had some understanding of Yu Qianqiu's name, as he said all kinds of nasty things. Things like disrespecting his masters, betraying one sect after another as a double surname slave. This challenge had become a war of words. All the sects looked at Yu Qianqiu, wondering how long could he endure it? Ziyi stared at the people below with a frosty face. It was fine if it was just 1 or 2 sentences, but if he continued to endure it, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the future. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't listen to it anymore. With a livid face, he stepped forward and shouted, How dare you shout at me? Are you tired of living? Are you courting death? Yu Qianqiu, come down and fight if you have the guts. Yancheng pointed his finger and shouted, Since you're tired of living, I'll send you down there to accompany your 2 junior brothers. After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking in a cold tone, he waved his hand, and a green flying sword flashed out from his sleeve, quickly carrying him into the sky. In the sky, he waved his two sleeves continuously, and streams of green light flew out continuously. The two sleeves were like storage bags, and no one knew how many flying swords were hidden in them. 1,000 flying swords danced in the sky, and the imposing manner was really shocking. Yu Qianqiu kept his sleeves. So far, with his current cultivation, controlling 1,000 flying swords at the same time was already his limit. Moreover, the green fire element in his body was almost depleted, and even if he wanted to release more swords, he couldn't release more. Chapter 396. The sunlight refracted the green shadows, and the green light flowed endlessly, covering the entire valley, causing the entire valley to sink into a hazy green light. Everyone squinted their eyes at the piercing green light, but they still couldn't conceal their shock. Rumor had it that there was an extraordinary person in the ancient times who could control 10,000 swords at the same time. The rumor was not to be believed, but now everyone had witnessed Yu Qianqiu releasing 1,000 flying swords in a fit of rage. They danced in the air and looked at the vast land like a tiger, wanting to take someone's life. Yen Cheng was dumbfounded as he looked up. He subconsciously felt that he had stirred up a hornet's nest. Yen Bugui and the rest looked at each other, then at Yu Qianqiu, who was coldly staring down from the sky. They all had an expression of disbelief. The people of Supporting Immortals Island looked at each other. Guyuan sword technique, 1,000 swords control. Yen Cheng, do you know your crime? Yu Qianqiu's cold voice descended from the sky and reverberated in the valley. The flying swords above his head all stopped. The dazzling green blades slowly adjusted their direction and stared at Yen Cheng below. The black flame machete was able to take someone's life with a single slash. It was impossible for it to happen again. This time, he sent out all the green flame flying swords that he could control. He wanted to have a fair and square battle, to let the entire cultivation world know of his abilities, and that he did not rely on luck to establish himself. A nascent soul cultivator was actually questioning a tribulation passing stage cultivator with such a matter-of-fact tone. Everyone was speechless. They didn't know if Yen Cheng could withstand the power of the 1,000 swords. It seemed that these green flying swords were not ordinary flying swords. If it was them, thinking of the scene of 1,000 flying swords shooting at them at the same time, everyone subconsciously shivered. Ziyi's gaze lingered on the 1,000 flying swords. Her pretty face was filled with excitement. She clenched her fists tightly. From Yu Qianqiu's domineering aura, she seemed to see the shadow of Senior Bai. The faces of the 4 major families were filled with solemn respect. The disciple of the old ancestor was not angry, but once he was angry, he would shake the world. What crime did I commit? Yen Cheng smacked his lips and asked dryly. His tone had changed from cursing and arrogant to cautious. When it came to life and death, it was strength that determined the opponent's attitude. Who told you my name? Yu Qianqiu glanced at the surrounding mountains and changed the topic. The moment he said that, the various sects started sizing each other up. In fact, everyone had the same suspicion as Yu Qianqiu. Yen Bugui snorted coldly and transmitted his voice to Yen Cheng. Mr. Yen, you don't have to hesitate. You can tell him that I told you. He had a grudge against Yu Qianqiu, so why would he care about one more dish? Although it didn't matter if he said it, how could Yen Cheng give him up? If he really did that, it wouldn't be a matter of him losing face. But his teacher who lived far away in Xiushui country would lose face with him. Thinking of his teacher who had reached the soul formation stage, Yen Cheng's confidence was boosted. He shouldn't be scared by his pretense. No matter how strong a nascent soul cultivator was, how strong could he be? So he waved his whip and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you want to fight then fight. Don't be so long-winded. At the end of the day, he still didn't have enough confidence. Otherwise, he would have made a move long ago, and wouldn't have been so long-winded. You really don't know what's good for you. In my eyes, that lousy whip of yours is no different from withered grass and rotten wood. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and raised his hand. I have 1,000 flying swords waiting for you. If you have the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, you might be able to escape from my 1,000 flying swords with your teleportation. Unfortunately, you're not. I'll give you one more chance to live. Tell me the person who said my name and cut off your own tongue. Then I'll let you go. Otherwise, you won't be able to see tomorrow's sunrise. After the battle with Luo Qingtian last time, Luo Qingtian's abnormal speed was so fast that even the flying swords couldn't catch up to him. It could be said that Yin Cheng had gained some experience. This time, the flying swords of blue fire were waiting for him in battle. They weren't afraid that Yin Cheng would escape to the sky. Presumptuous! Yin Cheng shouted loudly. His protective upstanding qi instantly surged out from his body and wrapped around himself. The long whip in his hand rose high into the air and shot towards Yu Qianqiu like a spiritual snake. You're courting death. Yu Qianqiu sneered. He pointed with his finger and dozens of streaks of green light flashed out. Like a jackdaw fighting for food, they surrounded the long whip and tossed it around wildly. Even though the flying swords of blue fire were not as good as the flying swords of blue fire, they were still first-rate sharp. Yin Cheng and his two brothers had encountered their nemesis when they encountered Yu Qianqiu. When the black dragon whip and the flying swords of blue fire clashed, it was already pecked all over. The others didn't know, but Yin Cheng immediately sensed it. In his great shock, he made a hand gesture. The black dragon whip made a bam sound and swung its tail in the air. It shook off Guoshir's flying swords of blue fire. It turned around and was about to fly back. Yu Qianqiu sneered. If there was only one flying sword of blue fire, perhaps it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. However, there were 1,000 of them here. A small whip could escape to the heavens. The sword gesture was activated. Dozens of flying swords had already cut off the whip's path of retreat. A group of ferocious fellows pounced forward and pecked wildly. It was practically a standard gang fight. Yin Cheng's face was filled with anxiety. The black dragon whip was the weapon that he had relied on to make his name. Once it was destroyed, it would be easier said than done to find another treasured weapon that was just as handy. His hand gesture was almost a mirage. The whip scurried everywhere in midair. It dodged left and right, shook its head and swung its tail. However, Yu Qianqiu's nimbleness in controlling the flying swords was not inferior to his control of the whip. Once the black dragon whip shook off Guoshir's flying swords, there would be flying swords that were ready to pounce on Guoshir's head, peck at his tail, and pinch at his waist. There was no way for him to escape. He did not allow the whip to escape. He pestered it relentlessly and wrapped it tightly. The divine whip that was previously feared by all the sects was now in such a sorry state. It had no way to escape. Everyone was speechless when they saw this. The people of Supporting Immortals Island looked at each other again and again. Ever since Yu Qianqiu had used the Guyuan sword technique on Supporting Immortals Island, everyone had actually studied this sword technique in detail. However, the conclusion that everyone had reached was that it was gaudy. They all felt that it was not practical. Now that 1,000 swords had appeared, just this imposing manner alone was already extraordinary. If they could achieve the effect of Yu Qianqiu's usage, even if the quality of the flying swords was not as good as this green flying sword, imagine if someone was entangled by 1,000 flying swords and ganged up on. Just like how this whip was entangled. Apart from a few people who possess great cultivation base, how many people could escape easily? Moreover, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation base was only at the nascent soul stage. If it was a cultivator at the crossing calamity stage, who was controlling it, what kind of consequences would there be? Just thinking about it made people feel expectant. They were guarding the treasured sword technique left behind by their ancestors without realizing it. Everyone had made an error of judgment. The people of Supporting Immortals Island suddenly came to their senses and nodded silently at each other. They decided that when they returned to the sect, they would definitely report this matter to the sect leader. They had to pay attention to the Guyuan sword technique. Yin Cheng was still trying his best to make hand seals, attempting to use his last effort to save the black dragon whip. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the sharp tail of the whip, which was either refined from a beast horn or a beast tooth, suddenly broke off from the long whip. A few green rays chased after it and stabbed it a few times. When they realized that it was useless, they immediately flashed back to join the group and continued to attack the long black thing. The fang-like tail of the whip fell to the ground sadly. However, it was just the beginning. With it leading the way, the broken whip followed in its footsteps. Yanqing felt like crying but had no tears. He stopped making hand seals, and the black dragon whip was dismembered just like that. The victorious green rays seemed to be a little unsatisfied. They flew around in the air for a while. When there was really no target to attack, they obediently returned to their sword positions. When the various sects witnessed this scene, they were speechless. Such a fierce sword technique was simply unheard of and unseen. Today was an eye-opener for them. When everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were much more solemn. In the past, when they heard that Yu Qianqiu defeated Luo Qingtian, many people did not see it with their own eyes. They thought that it was because of the sharpness of the treasure and luck. Now, everyone clearly saw the word strength. Although the outcome of this battle had not been decided, Yu Qianqiu had such a powerful and outstanding sword technique. There was no doubt that he should have a place in the cultivation world. The contemptuous gazes of the various sects had disappeared. From today onwards, they would look at this young man with a rather bad reputation. Ziyi's eyes were full of splendor. She watched with relish. It seemed that no matter when or who Yu Qianqiu fought, she would not be very worried. Because of her blind worship of Bai Changchun, she had already thought that Elder Bai's disciple should be like this. Yanqing looked around a little gloomily. Thousands of flying swords were floating in the valley, ready to attack from all angles, aiming at him inside the protective aura. The cyan sword net completely surrounded him. At this moment, whether it was the Cultivation Alliance or Yan Bugui and the others, when they saw the scene in the valley, they all felt a little ashamed for Yanqing. A tribulation-passing cultivator, fighting with a nascent soul cultivator, was actually trapped to the point that he could not move an inch. It was simply a joke. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yan Bugui, who was on the top of the mountain, and smiled faintly at Yanqing. Although you were the one who provoked me, I have always been a kind person. You are the only one left out of the three of you. I can't bear to kill you. If you kneel down and beg for mercy, I can spare your life. As soon as he said this, several cold snorts came from Yan Bugui's side, echoing in the valley. It could be seen that the person who made the sound had a very high cultivation. That group of people stared at Yu Qianqiu like knives. Yanqing was representing them. If he knelt down and admitted defeat, he would not only lose face, but Yan Bugui, and the others who took the initiative to challenge him, would also be completely disgraced. This was just like if someone from the Cultivation Alliance knelt down and admitted defeat. Then the face that the Huaxia cultivation world would be lost even if they wanted to in the future. The people from the Cultivation Alliance also secretly clicked their tongues, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had really gone too far by saying such words. But they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had other considerations. There were rules in the challenge. If one party admitted defeat, the other party could not kill again. He provoked them with words, because he wanted to cut off the other party's way of admitting defeat, and then kill them. He never thought that letting his opponent live was a good thing. Since he had decided to use this battle to earn a name in the cultivation world, then the experience from his previous life told him that it was often more effective to win people over with virtue than to have a fierce reputation. As long as he stood firm, he could slowly accumulate virtue and do good in the future. Sure enough, when Yanqing heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, don't be so arrogant. You want to force me to beg for mercy and admit defeat with just a flying sword? What a joke!" Clang! As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a green light hit his protective vigor chi like lightning. The protective vigor chi was not damaged at all, and the green light quickly returned to its place. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said with a smile, "Sure enough, you have something to rely on, no wonder. But today, I will let you foreign cultivators learn a lesson. How can the Huaxia cultivation world be a place where you can mess around?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference.
as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.